Good afternoon. This is a hearing of the Chatham Conservation Commission being held on June 12, 2024, in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Town of Chatham Wetlands Protection Bylaw. My name is Janet Williams and I serve as the chair. Today's hearing is being broadcast live on Channel 8 and is being recorded for the on-demand archives available on the town's website. It's being conducted in person, by phone, and by video conference. The agenda, instructions on how to attend, and copies of documents for review have all been posted on the town's website, which is mytowngovernment.org. You can access it through the link on the Conservation Commission website. So to all participants, whether you're attending by phone or online, we ask that you please remain muted unless you've been recognized by the chair. If you're attending by phone, you can mute and unmute by using *6. And if you are online and you're not a commission member, we ask that you please keep your camera turned off until you've been recognized. And you can indicate that you wish to speak by using the raised hand feature. And when you're recognized, please remember to identify yourself for the record. So that we have a record of a quorum attending today, I'll now ask each commissioner to indicate their presence. Vice Chair Karen Latin.
Present.
Bob Rawls. Not here yet, but he'll be here soon. Mary Sullivan.
Present.
Thank you. Elise Gordon.
Present.
Cheryl Maservi.
Present.
Eric Hilbert.
Present.
Associate Member Bob Delvecchio.
Present.
All right, we've established that we have a quorum. Before we begin the agenda, I'll ask Paul Whiteman, our conservation agent, if there are any announcements or requests for continuances today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. We have one request for a continuance, 30 Sears Point Lane. That'll be continued to, at the applicant's request, to June 26, 2024. We also had some agenda items that need to be moved around. We're going to hear 0 Parcel 9 Bridge Street Certificate of Compliance first. And David Clark has asked that 43 Edgewater Drive and 108 Beach Plum Road be moved to the end of the agenda. He's attending a funeral, be monitoring the hearings, and should be able to appear at the end.
All right, made note of that. And with that, Paul, do you want to lead us through the agenda?
Okay, first on the agenda is 0 Parcel 9 Bridge Street, Town of Chatham, map 14A, Parcel 9, SE 10 3384. The project was a coastal bank stabilization and installation of a dinghy rack. Mr. Keon is online. It was his project.
Mr. Keon is in the hearing room at the podium.
Oh, he's in the hearing room. He always
Yes.
comes down.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Ted Keon, Coast Resource Director. As Paul indicated, I'm looking for a certificate of compliance for this relatively small project at our Bridge Street landing. A very quick background on this. This was a town landing that we used to lease from the previous property owner for many years, decades actually, and then we ultimately were able to purchase it when that property changed hands and the new owner decided that he didn't really need this piece of property. So it is now owned by the town, which is a good news for perpetuity. But when we purchased it, we were concerned that the ongoing erosion at that small area, needed to be addressed. We had developed a somewhat typical small-scale fiber roll project for the site that also included a dinghy tie-up post along the seaward side to keep the dinghies from being up onto the bank, and beach nourishment. After the permit was received and approved, we kind of stepped back and decided we really didn't want to go at that point with the fiber rolls. We didn't think it was really needed and that we could address the site, the erosion issues simply with a nourishment approach. It's a quite low energy area, so we just felt this was a simpler way to deal with what we thought was a relatively minor erosion issue. So we have completed the project from this sort of lesser state with nourishment. The dinghy tie-up post has been installed. It's been in place for a couple years now, and basically just doing some housekeeping, realized we never requested a COC, so that's what we're here before you for.
All right, thank you. Yep, thank you. Looking at the photographs and going to the site, I remember the condition back in 2019, what it looked like and when we approved this. And it looks, it does, I mean, all the erosion appears to be remedied. And just the question, does the design of that tie-up rack, because of the three horizontal slats, help protect the bank behind it from
It does.
whatever small wave action? I mean, it's Mill Pond.
Yeah, it will
so there's
provide that. You know, the slats are really there to keep the dinghies from going underneath. We used to do just a single slat.
Right.
Dinghies will go underneath it.
And then
Sometimes it actually gets stuck, and then when the tide rose, the dinghy would lift the posts out of the ground.
right.
So we've kind of learned and decided to put additional slats to keep the dinghies out from going underneath.
Good idea, because I do recall from looking at it back in 2019 that it appeared to be that it was the damage caused by the dinghies being pushed up against the bank
They
that was
weren't-
causing the bottom to be
Yeah, I mean, there was
carved out.
definitely undermining occurring
Yeah.
through erosion, but the dinghies were not helping, to be
Yeah.
quite honest.
Yep, well, this looks like a good design, and hope it works. So questions, anybody? So, Paul, is this a partial? How do we do this? Is it-
It'll be a partial, the fiber roll setup portion of it will
never
just indicate wasn't completed. So we'll close it out with what was completed and then just indicate on the certificate of compliance that the fiber rolls weren't installed.
And if I may, you know, the only condition that we are looking for as a continuing condition is the ability to do
Nourish.
nourishment.
Yes.
Because we have been and will need to be
Yep.
continuing that.
We would hope that. So we'll keep that nourishment as a continuing condition? Paul?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, we'll put that in there.
Okay, perfect. All right. Do we have a motion to approve the certificate of compliance?
I move that we approve the certificate of compliance for 0 Parcel 9 Bridge Street.
Gordon, second.
Roll call vote. Elise?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's approved. All right, Paul, what's next?
Next on the agenda is a request to amend an order of conditions, 0 and 17 Billings Road, applicant Alex, I'm not going to get this right, but Pushkarav, map 7A, parcel 6-S8 and 5S7, SC10 3310 is the DEP number. The project is proposed repair of an existing sheet pile wall. This is a phase 2 amendment. I know the commission has questions.
All right, thank you. We have.
Good
some-
afternoon, Cole.
Yep. Go ahead, Cole.
Yep, Cole Bateman from Ty and Bond, representing the applicant, Mr. Pushkarev, for his properties here at 0 and 17 Billings. And I'm going to share my screen for a brief presentation, please.
Thank you.
Got that name wrong.
So this is, as Paul mentioned, a stage 2 for the amended order. We've been in front of the commission a couple times, as I'll go into detail here. A brief overview of the existing conditions of the project site. So this is a very seaward property along right next to Harding's Beach in Chatham. There's a pretty much a perimeter bulkhead around the project site, and the seaward portions are deteriorating, as well as are lower than need to be to provide adequate protection for the project site. So some items noted here in the pictures are such things as deteriorating steel sheet piles, which are along the east and west return walls. Along the seaward face is a timber facade wall that was installed in front of a previous steel wall that is showing signs of deterioration, and as well as the overall elevation of the bulkhead, which is approximately elevation 9.4 within a velocity zone that is much higher than that. I believe it's 15. Some background, as well as an accompanying photo of the Peninsula project site. So the project is on Nantucket Sound, just next to Harding Beach. Harding Beach is to the east in the photo here. The project site consists of a dwelling, a timber boardwalk, as well as that perimeter bulkhead I described earlier. The bulkhead, the rock revetment, and some repairs to the rock revetment are all licensed with those DEQE as well as the DEP license numbers with Chapter 91. And then back in 2019, a previous owner had applied for a shorter sheet pile wall repair along the west face to deal with that steel sheet pile erosion indicated in the previous picture. Back in earlier May of this year, we requested with the commission to extend that order of conditions, which was approved to May 20th, 2025. And then we also returned for an amended order stage 1, and now we're up for the stage 2 for the public notification as well as the request. Project scope and goals, again, just really covering top down, again, is to repair the existing bulkhead around the perimeter. I'll go to a plan view in a second, but just some really high level design and scope criteria that we were trying to accomplish here. The existing wall, as I mentioned, is approximately at elevation 9.4, which compared to projected sea level rise is about 2 feet lower than the 2050 1% annual exceedance probability, which is what our design standard has been recently for these residential properties. That's still water elevation. In order to install the wall, we're proposing to cut down a portion of the top of the existing timber wall to drive either new sheet piles or new helical piles, or to augment the existing tiebacks that are currently there. Then a new sheet pile wall would be installed seaward of the existing timber bulkhead, and all the work would be done above mean high water because the revetment is where the mean high water line is. Along the west face, which I'll get to in a second, east face, which I'll get to in a second, is a timber stair. Those would also be rebuilt to accommodate the new height of the bulkhead. And then within the footprint, I'll go to the plans real quick while we talk about this. Within the footprint of the backyard, there are existing timber boardwalks that will be replaced because of the condition they're in, as well as to gain access to the project site. Switch it back to the presentation. And that's really it for the project scope. Resource areas being impacted include the coastal beach, coastal dune, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. The sheet piles that were previously proposed and approved in the order were in the same resource areas or required access through the same resource areas in order to install them. And then going to the construction protocol, which is a good transition, in order to install the proposed sheet pile extension from the previous order, a similar access is being proposed from Harding's Beach along the coastal beach, and then we're proposing temporary access way be constructed up and over the western side of the bulkhead, over the rock revetment, and onto the project site. That would be below the coastal dune, but on the coastal beach, and also below the limit of vegetation that's currently there. And again, this is in order to access the project site due to the equipment, which we anticipate would be a pretty good size excavator to install the sheets and tiebacks as well. We'll certainly follow the typical protocols within the town for DEP postings, as well as pre-construction meetings and ongoing conditions that we typically see for projects of this type. That's it for my brief presentation. I'll switch over to the plan views real quick just to run through them again and provide just an overall encompassing summary of the proposed again. So the components of the project include repairing, and I'm going to go to the proposed, repairing an existing bulkhead by installing a sheet pile bulkhead around the perimeter, replacing these timber boardwalks with new diamond pier foundations and timber framing in kind, and then a reconstructed stair here on the west side. And with that being said, I would appreciate any comments or questions the commission may have.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Let me just start, because I was here in 2019, and I remember this project, and what you've submitted reads more like an initial notice of intent rather than an amended order. But when we issue a document, we only highlight the differences from the project that was already approved. So I'm trying to, and I was looking at the site plans, trying to figure out exactly what the differences are between what's being proposed now and what was approved in 2019. Can you walk us through that?
Yes, certainly, and I apologize for not indicating that initially. So I do have the approved plans from the 2019 application up. I'm going to switch to the proposed section. So what was previously proposed and approved was approximately, I think it's a 70-foot extension, or I'm sorry, repair to the westernmost wall, ranging from the street down towards just below the coastal dune and to approximately where there's an existing access there. The proposed scope here is to continue that repair around the perimeter of the remainder of the project site to have a cohesive durability as well as to increase the flood protection. So the wall would be increased in elevation compared to what was previously approved, as well as extended around the project site for the completion of the perimeter.
Okay, so it's the extension of what was approved on the western side to the seaward side and then up along the eastern flank side. And it's 2 feet higher, going to elevation 11.4?
Correct, yeah. And I guess I should say along the east and west walls, it slopes up a bit. So what would be, there's a certain flat portion here along the seaward face, and maybe that's indicated in my first picture. Oh, you can't really see it, but just beyond this this stair, the wall begins to slope up, so that the 2 feet would really, start where that flattens out, and then the 2 foot extension would be along the lower wall.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go.
Can you tell me what the material was in the original proposal?
Yeah, it was a composite. It was a composite sheet pile tile. It was a vinyl wall, but we've requested to change that to an FRP, which is also a composite sheet pile.
So to channel my friend Bob Rawls, that's plastic, right?
It would be yeah, sure. Yes, it would be.
Okay.
Well, the vinyl is plastic, and then I guess FRP would have epoxy resins, which could probably be considered another type of plastic.
Okay, thank you.
Do you need an amendment to your Chapter 91?
We'll be seeking a minor modification likely, but we'll get guidance with DEP for what they recommend. We had initial conversations with DEP, who recommended that we proceed with a minor modification, and that was also to include other portions of a potential project which aren't indicated in the plans today. So this is really step one, is to protect the site for potential upgrades to the other aspects of the project site. We just really want to have a well-protected area for both the resource areas and as well as the assets of the site.
Okay. And so in order to identify any new or different special conditions than what was specified in 2019, has, for example, the construction protocol changed, or does that need to be, do we need to put in new conditions for that?
So
It says it's similar, and I don't know what that means, similar.
It's similar for access. I think we had we did request access from Harding's Beach parking lot in both applications, and believe that was included in it might have been mentioned in the order conditions as well. I'll have to check that one specifically. But maybe just the expanded, impact to the resource areas by coverage would be really the difference. But not necessarily to a construction protocol. The same equipment would be used. It just, the limit of work is very similar because the access would have to be along the beach and into the project site. So I
Okay.
think the protocol is generally similar.
So can you put that together in writing and submit that to us so we can incorporate that as new conditions and remove any superseded conditions so that there's no confusion?
is that a request for a narrative of the construction protocol? Or?
Yeah, just what, yeah, or just bulleted or something that's easily accessed.
Yeah, sure. We included a more brief summary of the protocol within the revised application, but I'll break that out into its own document.
Yeah, it's less, it's with an emphasis on what is different from
Sure,
what was
okay.
approved. I mean, I can read that and I see that, but if it's, depending on how similar it is, we wouldn't need to restate it if it's
Right.
just redundant. So
Okay,
what we're looking
very good.
for is really zeroing in on the differences here.
Okay, very
Okay.
good. And then one thing I will mention too, because you'll likely like to mention it as well, is there was a MISA review of the project back in the 2019 application, and we've reached out to NHESP, have not heard back from them for any revised comments. But yeah, again, largely the protocol is the same, so we hope you consider that in your review.
Okay, go ahead, Karen.
Okay, I have the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries, the letter that was dated May 28th, 2024 to us. And their recommendations, I just want to make sure that you're going to follow these. They say no construction should take place between May 1st and July 31st of any year. They also say the repair of this structure should be within the same footprint of the existing structure or landward. And we are remaining in that footprint, correct? And that,
I would say no, not fully. What's being
Yeah.
proposed is that within the rock revetment area, the wall is being within the same footprint because the revetment
Yeah.
would we lose area of the revetment and replace it with area sheet pile. But along the return walls, and I'll bring up the plans again, because
Yeah.
this is a common statement we received from DMF, and I'd like to address it with the commission too. Right along the east and west flanks where there is no revetment, where it dives back into the bank, there would be an extension beyond. I'll have to see where that aligns with the selfish growing area or suitability area, but we believe that any removal of sheet piles requiring excavation would be tremendously more damaging to the resource areas than simply going right next to them.
right, and I thought that it was being extended, and so that's why I wanted you to address that. I don't know what we do about that, but, and they also says much work as possible should be conducted from the upland portion of the project site to minimize impacts and avoid compaction of sediment in mapped shellfish habitat, and limit it to low tide when you're doing the work. And I think that definitely, those will be a part of anything that we, write for you, any amended order.
Okay, comment on the access. We're requesting access, and we will be requesting access from the town. We understand that we'd have to do that as well. And this is similar to the past application. Would be I'm going to go to this sheet. Would be along the face of the
Right.
The revetment at a lower tide, and then up and over the wall. So we're not doing a daily, in and out of the project site back to Harding's Beach. It would be mobilization and then demob in order to get out. Other than that, I think the access would have to be, and we were almost proposed this, but thought the commission would look significantly down on it, would be to construct a temporary access road down the dune and then revegetate on the way out to make it so we're not traversing down the beach. So we did look into an alternative for that, but believe we proposed the best solution for the resource areas, the project site, and for timely completion of the project in this current construction protocol, which is consistent with the approved application.
So your protocol hasn't changed since the last,
I'll review specific components, but access from Harding's Beach was included in the
Right.
last.
Oh, no, I know that. And this, you're saying the protocol hasn't changed, so you originally had presented in 2019 that you would be going over a dune. And,
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant considering the amended order this amended order application, we were considering changing the access from the upland, but then decided to stay consistent with the previous access along the beach.
okay, so you're accessing along the beach. And you'd
And
be
that's
doing
consistent
that
with
at low tide.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and it wouldn't be a repetitive daily cycle. It would be access, do as much work as possible, and then, take it out at the end of the construction. It's a nice work area in the yard there, and we're trying to take advantage of it instead of having to either construct a temporary platform, elevated platform to store equipment, or like I said, traversing the beach or accessing from the upland.
Yeah.
I have
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. You're not removing the existing revetment, right, on the south side? You're gonna work
Just
behind it?
augmenting it to install the sheet piles, and then
Yeah.
the
And
stones
what-
would be
when you
replaced.
When you install the pilings, what equipment do you use?
Yeah, it'd be an excavator. It'd be a large excavator to vibrate the sheets in.
All right, so there's not enough footage on the east side of the house to get through?
Well, on the east side, there's this. You're asking between the 16-foot. This is a sloping walkway, a pretty steep walkway. I think it's. I can get a quick scale here, but it might be like a 1 to 2. So that we don't believe that this is a safe access for an excavator.
For an
to
excavator?
traverse down, right?
So you're gonna come down the beach, go up onto that, up onto the backyard, and you're gonna park there for the duration of this project?
That's the intent, exactly.
Okay.
Bob, you look like you have a question.
So in case, so we have waves maybe in a storm, and they're going to flow over that revetment, over the wall and onto the boardwalks and that flat area. How will the seawater infiltrate down through?
Yeah, we're proposing weeps within the wall, so it would go out of the wall. We don't expect all the storm water to infiltrate within the yard area.
So there'll be holes in the wall, and so the water can escape that way.
Correct. Yeah, I think we had showed that in a section. Yep.
And what about vegetation on that flat area? I think
Yeah, there is.
There's some vegetation now. You plan on planting any more?
I mean, I could ask our
You could have
clients.
a-
It's
you could
not
have a
currently
concert
being
out there.
It's not currently being proposed. This is, I believe, where there's no boardwalk. I was there in the dormant season, but it's a pretty productive beach grass or whatever the actual species is within these open areas. This isn't like a mowed area currently.
So is it, probably, it was probably over there probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, so I can't remember fully. But there's no turf grass in there, it's just beach grass and maybe some bayberry maybe, and some, I think I noticed some pines in there as well.
Yeah, there's some pines. I think those are indicated here. And along the house, there was a planter, and the previous owner was really adamant during some work we did inside the building to keep that vegetation as well. So yes, it is vegetated.
So could you plant in any vacant areas, could you plant in those areas just to kind of help stem any, wave action or erosion?
Possibly. There is some erosion mitigation through this stone apron, and I think
Right.
largely the boardwalk's set on top of stone.
Right.
There's it's really just laid down. So I think a combination of that as well as the planted areas would help. But I mean, I think our clients would be open to whatever additional vegetation, if it's considered for mitigation or whatever. I think erosion-wise, we're protecting the site again from the bulkhead, we'd be having weeps, and then have the same vegetation that's currently there to assist.
Yeah, I'd like to see more vegetation planted there in those areas. I think it would be helpful long-term.
Would that be in lieu of boardwalk? Or is that replacing boardwalk or just finding more places to?
No, just, just within those areas that are already planted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the boardwalk going to be timber or polymer?
Good question. We're proposing it, a replacement in kind with timber,
Okay.
or pressure treated timber.
Was there, and I've reread the Division of Marine Fisheries letter, and they weren't specific on the replacement of the timber, using timber in the replacement of the bulkhead. I don't know if in 2019 we approved the other material,
Vinyl.
but we did, okay,
did.
so we're not concerned about its impact on the,
We already approved.
on the marine, so
In
it's
our
approved.
Our
Pre-plastic
pre-plastic
concern, oh, pre-plastic paranoia, okay, thank you,
Version.
thank you.
version, better, yeah,
Okay, when are we going to?
yeah. It's durable. Any other questions from anyone? All right, Cole, I guess I have here that the two things I've written down is that you'll send us a list of aspects, I would say, of this project that are different from what was already approved, so we can highlight that in the amended order. And you'll add vegetation to the plan, as Bob discussed with you. Anything else?
I think it needs to-
Natural,
Mimisa, yeah.
yep. If you can, see if you can
We'll try
shake a
again.
letter out of them.
Yeah, we were trying to find the last letter too, and I know,
If there's no response if there's no response within a certain period of time, they waive their right to respond.
How long, do you know? Would that?
I believe I want to say 30 days, but I'd have to check it. But it's standard language in all the letters that they issue, so
Okay,
if they don't issue anything, they waive their right to
Oh.
to do that. We can check the date.
okay. Silence
Paul might wanna do
equals
the same thing. Yeah.
Acquiesce?
acquiescence, that's the word. So, Cole, we're going to continue this to let you get these last two pieces in, and our next date is, what did we say?
It's
I have it on my
probably
sheet.
July 10th.
July 10th.
Right.
And that will, at that point, you'll either have something, or we will be beyond that 30 days where they will have waived their right to ask for anything. So, everybody okay with that as the plan? All right, let's have a motion then to continue to July 10th.
I move that we continue 0 and 17 Billings Road to the meeting on July 10th, 2024 for amended order of conditions Phase 2.
Gordon, second.
Roll call vote, Elise?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so we will see you back here on July the 10th. Thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you for your consideration. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Paul, let's move on to the next item.
Next item on the agenda, Madam Chair, we now move to notice of intents. First on the notice of intent agenda is 500 Shore Road, Heather Butler, map 16G is the applicant, parcel 3D, 85, DEP number SE 103681. Project is for, construction of beach access stairs within the pedestrian access easement located at 500 Shore Road.
All right, thank you. Hello, gentlemen. Before you introduce yourselves, and let me just add for the record that we last had you here and spoke to you on May the 8th, at which point we were focused on and concerned about the issue about whether, as easement holders, the applicants had the right to apply for a notice of intent. Thank you for the memorandum that you provided us. That was helpful. Even more helpful were statements from DEP saying that their policy is to treat easement holders as owners for purposes of filings. So we have overcome that obstacle. But I will just point out for the record again that we are only assessing the impacts to the resource areas here. And as DEP says, they completely, repeatedly say, we will not get involved in private property disputes. That is outside of everything that we do. And in fact, the order of conditions that we would issue, were we to issue one, states generally in bold that it doesn't necessarily entitle the permit holder to proceed with the project until all other legal authorizations are in place, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, that's your issue, but we will proceed based on the presumption that we have been instructed to apply. So,
Appreciate your comments, Madam Chair. And for the record, my name is TJ Hurry. I'm an attorney with Saney and Associates. With me today is Don Bracken, our project engineer, and our client Heather Butler is in the audience this afternoon. Do appreciate your comments and the commission's review of our memorandum and the input from DEP. Most of my comments today were going to address that, like I was going to address during the first meeting, our right to proceed with this project as easement holders. But if we've cleared that hurdle, very good. I don't want to put Don on the spot, but if he has anything else to add, I might toss it over to him for his comments. I will note that a few minutes before this hearing got underway, we did receive an email from Natural Heritage. They seem to be hung up on the same easement issue as the commission was during the first hearing. So I'm happy to forward that same memorandum to them to clarify issues.
okay. Okay.
Okay, I gave a brief presentation last time, so I'll just go through the bullet points for the project again. The total length is 133 feet consisting of landings and steps traversing down a slope with about a 53-foot change in elevation from the top to the bottom. The maximum width of the stairway, including the posts, is 4 feet. The inside width is about 3.4 feet. We try to keep it as narrow as we could. I know you're already familiar with the area. There's been recent bank stabilization taking place that we indicate on the plan that we're going to work around for the construction of the new steps. We plan on wooden framing and wooden steps, except for the last section, which will be a removable aluminum set. We also indicated on the plans where that would be stored during the off-season at the top of the bank, and off the bank, obviously. We're proposing a helical screw support system for the post, which will be done with a hand rig, so there won't be any heavy machinery traversing on the slope itself. As mentioned before, there's a 10-foot wide access easement that will be utilized for construction, and all the work will be contained within that 10-foot wide area. Currently, within that 10-foot wide area, from the top down, maybe a third of the way, there's an existing footpath that travels within that easement. Obviously, that will be eliminated as part of the stairway construction. From that point, it's sort of open how you would meander down to the beach. There's some openings, but not really a defined footpath once you get beyond the one that was showing on the plan. All the work for, cutting any materials, storing materials will be off the coastal bank, as indicated in the notice of intent. There'll be a 12-inch minimum clearance for any structure above the grade along the bank. And we, listed the work construction protocol, pretty much outlined it already, with stockpiling materials and assembly work and that sort of thing. And I think the most important thing is utilizing the helical screws, which can all be carried down, and no heavy equipment would be required for that. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me open it up to questions from commission members. Who would like to start? Go ahead, Karen.
Okay. I'm just curious about, you're removing some fencing, and there's also a bunch of arborvitae. I assume those aren't affected because you're not showing that you have to do anything with those, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Right now, the owner of the property has a fence going across
Right.
the easement, so there's no access there. So that's within the 100-foot buffer, so we wanted to specify there will be removal of the fence. I don't think we're proposing anything with the arborvitaes. There's still enough space to get by those arborvitaes.
Okay.
Unless the owner decides that they want to reconfigure that, we're not proposing anything with the
All right, but
arborvitae.
you do have enough space to get whatever equipment you need to do your work
Yes,
past the arborvitae?
yeah. I mean, and everything will be carried in anyway, so I think there's probably about 5 or 6 feet there to get through.
And then you have this 3-foot wide walking path, and you say it will be shell or crushed stone to get to your start of your
Yes,
walk?
I think that's a,
It says proposed 3-foot wide
Yep.
pervious walking path, shell or crushed stone, and it's right before the area where you're going to store the aluminum portion, it looks like, or it's right where the aluminum portion. I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure it is going to be pervious and you are going to do shell or stone.
yes, that's the intent. I think it's probably only 5 or 6 feet long, something like that.
Right.
Yeah,
But I just want to make sure that it will remain pervious.
correct.
All right, those are my main concerns.
Okay, thank you. Eric, anything?
Well, we have a format at least for stairways.
Yes, we do. We
Yeah.
now have
Yeah.
a series of
We don't have to
standard
go through
conditions.
all that. That's it.
Okay, Bob?
From Shore Road to the new stairway, there's going to be you have that easement, but is there going to be a path through the lawn?
We're not proposing that at this time. Our original plan, we did propose a path, but I think our client, decided that we really don't need a path for the frequency that's going to be there.
So he's not concerned about damage to the lawn or anything like that?
Well, my guess is that is something that should be coordinated and talked about with the owners that are there and somehow worked out. If it becomes an issue, then I think it would have to be addressed. I would assume that, they may want to take a look at some landscaping changes in that area themselves. But for our application, I don't think we can propose anything to alter what they have.
And Karen mentioned the fencing. You're going to remove a section where that path is going to go. And that white fence, the vinyl fence, is kind of like a pool fence for the owner. So that's going to have to be reconfigured, correct?
Yeah, that will either have to be reconfigured, or there'd have to be a gate installed there instead of removing the fence.
Okay, and the owner is aware of that?
That I'm not sure about, I think. This is the first stage. There should be discussions with the owner, I think, once we get past this stage.
Okay. I think that those were my questions. I had a question about the arborvitae too. That's it, thank you.
All right, thanks, Bob. Over this side? Questions?
The grass seeding toward the erosion control grass seeding, what type of grass will that be?
We haven't really specified, but we can,
Okay.
whatever, past precedent is that if you have a specific type of seed, we could come up with one, or if there's one.
Is it a lawn type?
No, definitely not a
So
lawn type.
it can
Yeah,
be beach grass or whatever?
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
whatever's consistent with what you've seen on other projects.
Specification would be great in the next phase or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. We'll put that down the list. I was about to ask a similar question, which is, one thing that sort of flummoxes us a little bit is normally when there's, this is 4 feet, roughly 4 feet exterior to exterior by 133 feet, total of 532 square feet of coverage of impact, which we normally would look for mitigation. But I don't know that there's any right to do any mitigation where your rights to the property are limited to access. But I think that the one thing that the order would specify is that proper erosion controls are set into place, and maybe we can reach an agreement on the planting of beach grass around where the support structures are placed and under the stairs that can get sufficient light so that it prevents any further erosion of that bank. And I leave it to you and to the owners to work out. It's for everybody's best interest to do that, to prevent any erosion, so we would want to see that. We do note that you do need to go to ZBA for a special permit Has that been filed yet?
We have an amended application with amended plans that I am filing as soon as we're done here.
Okay, so knowing what we know about their scheduling, you don't have much chance of being in front of them much before late July, even early August. So we've given you a couple of things to think about in terms of plantings and specifying that, specifying the walking path, the pervious walking path material. I don't know that we specify, that we have anything else on our list. What about it?
They're taking a section
Oh,
of the pool
right.
fence, and I don't know if they have to then.
Again, that's a question
That's-
to
that- yeah,
coordinate.
Yeah,
with-
that's
yeah, we
more
don't-
between them and the owner.
Yep. So to allow you time to go to ZBA, and we will continue this to August the 7th. And if for any reason you get a hearing date that's beyond that, let us know, and we will continue it to whatever the first date is after your scheduled date with ZBA. But let's just go with August 7th and see if we can make that.
For an order.
No, that's for
No,
a check-in,
just-
and then
okay.
we'll schedule the order.
Janet, can I just make a comment?
Yep.
So underneath the stairs, something may have to be more shade tolerant, just to hold the bank, as well as the beach grass that Janet mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move any motions, I see, is that Attorney Zager on the platform there? Or is that,
Yes, it's Adam Zager from Choate Holland Stewart in Boston, and
Yep.
I'm here with my colleague Sarah Brohl. We're mainly just, we wanted to understand what was going to happen with respect to the application. We have some of the same questions, and obviously you're not adjudicating private property rights. We had some of the same questions about mitigation, about what was going to be under the stairs. It looked like there was proposed mulch as opposed to the plantings. So we have some of those questions, and obviously we have to work with and discuss with the applicant the issues surrounding fence, a gate,
Yep.
storage, if this is going to proceed,
Yep.
without waiving any rights. We just wanted to understand those issues, and it sounds like
Yep.
we have a lot of the same questions you do that we can really defer until this goes forward to the next hearing.
okay, fine, you have until August 7th to consult with one another and see if you can come up with some agreements about how it's going to be handled. And then when we reconvene on the 7th, hopefully, we can record all of that and then get it ready for an order.
Happy to reach
Okay.
out to Attorney Zager in the meantime. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we have a motion to continue to the 7th?
I have moved that we continue 500 Shore Road for a notice of intent to the meeting on August 7th, 2024.
Gordon, second.
Roll call vote, Elise?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I vote aye. We'll see you all back here August 7th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. All right, Paul, what is
All
the
right,
next
next-
one?
Next on the agenda, notice of intent, 93 Scattery Road, Scott Ward and Ingrid Goldman are the applicants, map 16J, parcel 28-9, DEP number SE10 3679. Project is replacement of an existing cesspool and tennis court.
Good afternoon. Before you start, once again, I just want to recap where we are for context. We last talked to you on May 22nd. And I think the only thing that we asked for was to combine the mitigation that's already been approved with the mitigation that's being proposed to offset this project onto a single plan and color code it so we can see what was in the past, what's in the present, and we can better understand all of the mitigation. I know we've received a planting plan and a materials plan, but I don't think it's color-coded, but you can tell me about this plan, if this is what we were talking about.
Yep, so Thomas Mulcahy with Mulcahy Design Group, landscape designer for the project. And on sheet D1,
The last sheet.
the last sheet, I outlined in red text the square footage differences from the previously approved to what we're proposing now.
Okay, so I'm seeing 1151 square feet proposed native plantings, 0 previously approved for the 0 to 50.
Correct.
And 1526 square feet in addition to the 592 previously approved for the outer aura.
Correct.
Okay?
But it's not color-coded where on the plan that shows your plantings that are going in, and forgive me, because we just received this yesterday afternoon, and some people just got it before the meeting, so we all haven't had a huge amount of time to review it. But on L 3.0, which is what's titled Planting Plan, you have it all, but it's not color-coded as far as what's from the previous order and what's for now.
So,
So it's hard to tell, I mean, there's a lot,
yeah.
a
We're
lot.
proposing a
and-
lot, quite a bit more than what was previously approved.
Right, but you can't tell which is for this order and which is for that order. And I understand that you know, having pointed out in the red what's proposed versus what previously was approved,
Right.
but that doesn't tell me which parts of this planting plan go with which order.
It was essentially they were essentially foundation plantings on the
Right.
Blue Flax design plan.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of that because I went back to get that plan. What I was hoping.
We can provide you with that.
Okay.
If you
Yeah,
need
it
some,
was-
if you
That's
need
what I
a
was
color-coded plan, that's easy.
We do.
Yeah, it
I-
just.
It was a different designer,
And
so,
eventually for enforcement, to make sure that you've done what was specified, it will make it easier for that phase.
When it comes to
Okay.
certificate
Yeah.
of compliance, there's two different
Got it.
orders to be checked, so, but I think that's the only thing we need.
No, there were
Yeah.
there were two other
things.
items from the
Oh,
previous
wait, okay,
hearing.
sorry, go ahead.
The existing chain link fence sections to the north and south of the tennis court were asked to be removed.
Yep.
We've called those out to now be removed
Okay,
for our habitat corridor.
yep,
And I believe
Not be-
there was a request
Right.
for no overhead tennis court lighting,
yep.
and we've made notation of that as well.
Okay, and I know, I'm hearing Karen say knotweed. You had said you would have a conversation with the owner about whether they would be willing to start some kind of program to deal with the knotweed before it takes over everything. Any progress on that? Any willingness to?
I believe the intent is just to maintain the existing lawn path.
Can't the knotweed be used part of the mitigation? Is it possible, or is it already pretty much been determined? If it's been determined,
So,
it's,
in other words, they don't want to deal with the knotweed. If you're saying they just want to use the existing lawn path,
To keep it at
To
bay.
keep it at bay.
but they don't want to do anything further,
Well,
correct?
we don't have that much property to work within.
Right,
So we're just, the knotweed extends much further onto
Oh,
the
yeah.
adjacent property.
it
and
does.
So that's what we would prefer to do.
So the walking path is your best shot at keeping it, even though it goes right under and comes
Yep.
back up and all of that. But there will be a condition in the order, and I think there probably is one in the existing order, that mitigation area has to be kept free of invasive vegetation in perpetuity. So whatever process they do to keep it on that side of the path and keep it from getting into the mitigation is going to be maybe an ongoing battle, but that's just part of the charm of having a property adjacent to knotweed.
I have a notation about a auto cover for the pool.
Yep.
What kind of cover, do they have a cover for the pool, or are they doing an auto cover? or
This,
what is
it's a
it?
proposed pool that we're gonna do an auto cover for.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Then I think we can schedule this for an order for July 10th.
And we'll get you a colored
And you
plan.
get the color copy. Thank you very much for that. It just makes life a lot easier.
I just have a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
How is it gonna be maintained, this new landscape? They're gonna hire someone to manage it and manage the invasives and all that?
To keep the knotweed at bay?
No, I'm talking about the new plantings, keep them watered and the beds weeded and,
Yes, I believe I have conservation notes that everything will be temporary irrigation for the first 2 to 3 growing seasons and no permanent irrigation
Thank you. Asking.
and so forth.
It's 93.
Were you, have you identified a landscape firm or contractor to do that yet?
We haven't gotten,
Okay.
once we receive approval, would start that process.
Okay. Okay. All right, then we,
I move that we continue 93 Scattery Road to the meeting on July 10th, 2024 for an order of conditions.
Gordon, second.
roll call vote. Elise?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so.
Thank you.
See you back here for an
Thank you.
order. We're 15 minutes away. All right, Paul, what's next?
Next is a continued hearing, that's 30 Sears Point Lane, McClay Family Property, Limited Liability Company,
Dave is
map
here.
11A, 1, parcel 6-4, DEP number SE10 3677. Proposed
Oh.
waterfront maintenance, and the applicant has requested
Hang on,
continuance
let's
to
see.
June 26, 2024, Madam Chair.
Don't make them suffer to wait.
I know.
You hear me?
Yes, yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
all right.
We're just, there's a change in the room here, so we're just reacting to that. and,
Oh, all right.
Let's do the motion to continue 30 Sears Point Lane.
I move that we continue 30 Sears Point Lane to the meeting on June 26, 2024 for a notice of intent.
Gordon, second.
Roll call vote. Elise?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I vote aye. We'll hear that then. Mr. Clark has returned and is here on time. So, Paul, how do we proceed? Do we bring the two?
If Mr. Clark's ready to go forward and you're ready to hear him, I know at some point you want to take a break. You can go forward.
Yeah,
as per the
let's cover
agenda.
these two, and then we'll have the break before we take up the airport.
I
Okay.
think so.
Okay. Because I know
All right,
that gives
we
Bob a few more minutes to join us.
Okay.
No,
Ready?
not yet. Okay, we are ready
All
to
right.
go to the first of
All
those.
right. 43 Edgewater Drive, H. Godfrey Moulton Jr., map 15A, 1, parcel H125, DEP number SE10 3684. Project is construction of a 31 square foot addition and installation of utilities and a generator.
David Clark, Clark Engineering on behalf of the Moultons, Joyce Williams of Joyce Williams Design. I think we left last time, you wanted some changes or requested some changes on the mitigation plan. Joyce made those and is here to talk about them. We still have to go to Zoning Board of Appeals, but it's for that little itty-bitty addition to the dwelling.
And we have down 725 for the ZBA?
I don't know, I haven't been in contact.
That's
Oh,
correct.
here he is. Okay.
We have 25
Okay,
for ZBA.
Great.
just wanted to make sure.
Hello, Joyce.
Hi.
I'm just trying to screen share here and I'm getting blocked by Teams. Go ahead, I'll see if I can pull up your plan. That's what I'm working on here.
Joyce Williams, Landscape Design, West Chatham.
Okay. You want to recap where we left things and how you
Certainly.
revised your plan?
It was proposed that the mitigation area be moved from the original location, which was closest to the resource area and the barrier resource system, to be contiguous with the existing plantings that are to the west of the dwelling, in the area of where there's an existing oak tree shown on the plan. And we have moved that same amount of mitigation, which is shown in color, to the south end of that patch of natural vegetation.
Okay.
So the plant list remains the same, the square footage coverage remains the same, the protocol for doing the work remains the same.
All right,
So the narrative and the plant lists have not changed.
okay. Questions from commission members?
Joyce, will there be like any rock around there just to kind of keep it safe and?
None planned, but there are other plantings closer to that dotted parking area, again, to the west of where this mitigation planting was suggested. And there's some revegetation in there that's pretty obvious because of the mowing that's going on around it. So I didn't feel the need for it, and it appears that the homeowner is aware of it and may have, I don't know how that other planting came about, but it's all native materials that are in an attempt to revegetate that area around that parking area. So it's pretty obvious because it's, the lawn is mowed so infrequently and it's so barren, if you will, that I don't think any of our mitigation plantings are going to go unnoticed.
You don't think they're going to be mowed over or anything like that?
It doesn't appear as if there's enough woody plant material in that lawn right now that it doesn't appear to me that that would be the case.
The homeowner has something to say about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're going to spend money on that planting. We're not going to mow. I do the mowing. And we're not.
Okay, that's the part I couldn't
Good
answer.
for A rare thing around here.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so you have, you go to zoning on July 25th.
That's
So
right.
we will continue to, just in case, because this has happened, we've had a couple of hiccups from zoning. We will continue it for an order on August 7th, assuming that there's no changes to the plan that come out of zoning.
Terrific.
All right,
I move that we continue 43 Edgewater Drive to the meeting on August 7th, 2024 for an order of conditions.
Gordon, second.
okay, roll call. Elise?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I vote aye. We'll see you back here then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Paul, where's,
Okay, next on the agenda is 108 Beach Plum Road, R. Paul Detweiler, map 4D, parcel 23, SE 10 3674. The project is demolition of an existing single-family dwelling and cottage and construction of a new dwelling and cottage within land subject to coastal storm flowage.
David Clark again at Clark Engineering. You saw this last month. There was some questions about some trees in the turning area to the cottage. We went out and spotted one more tree. We've moved the turning area to the west to get further away from that tree. The other thing that occurred going through the zoning process is the health department determined that the septic system's not adequate, so we have to replace that. So what the other revision to the Clark Engineering plan is we show a new leach field that's just outside the 100-foot buffer of the coastal bank. We will have to trench up the hill from a new septic tank pump chamber that's located just as you go onto the property to the right. Unfortunately, the only location for that tank and still have gravity feed from the main house is where there's one tree. So I believe Teresa's, I don't know if anybody from Blue Flags is on the line, but Teresa did add additional mitigation trees to her plan for that additional tree that has to come out. The trenching up the hill for the force main can be done with a mini excavator. I don't foresee any collateral damage in that installation. Because we're rebuilding the driveway for the cottage, that would be an ideal staging area to put the leach field in, so the excavator could easily climb up that hill and do that excavation without clearing a construction access to that area. And this was approved by zoning board of appeals.
Questions, comments?
No.
No?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Wow. Okay. I don't have anything. We've got the revised plans. Then I guess we can continue this for an order for the 24th, which would be?
We had said July 24th.
Yep.
That works.
Yep, July 24th.
Does July
Great,
24
that's
work?
fine.
Okay,
Yeah, we're not going to get started till the fall anyway, so.
yeah, okay. Oh, well, then in that case, no, okay.
Yeah. We'll wait until. I move that we continue 1808 Beach Plum Road to the meeting on July 24th, 2024 for an order of conditions.
Gordon, second.
Roll call vote, Elise?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I vote aye, too.
Thank you.
Thank you, we'll see you back here then. All right, Paul, that is the last of the
Yeah.
pre,
That,
all right,
Yes.
we're going to take a 5-minute break, 6-minute break. We'll be back at 2:15 while we send some messages to bring some other folks in. We will be right back, thank you. All right, we are back. Please, everybody in the room, have a seat. Bob's there, he's here. And, yep, just a note for the record and to Crystal that Commission Member Bob Rawls has joined us. He's on the platform. So we are ready to proceed. Okay. Where we are, context and status. This is, we're getting to the end of what is very much a long and winding and quite bumpy road, but we are getting there. We have received from the applicant a revised notice of intent that clarifies and corrects and revises some of the material that had been previously submitted and updates it. So that has been posted on the website, so if you want the most recent notice of intent, that's available there. We have received further submissions from members of the community, commenters. Those have all been, along with the revised NOI, been copied and distributed to all members of the commission and posted on the website. So with that, today's order of proceedings is to address and resolve a couple of outstanding issues that were left open at the last hearing. We will then allow commission members to ask any questions that they still have regarding those. We will allow any final statements from commenters with some limitations that I'll explain when we get to that point. We'll allow the applicant an opportunity to make any final statement. We will then move into deliberations among the commission members, where each member will make a statement about how they view the application at this point and what their current inclination is. We are not making any decisions today, but after 9 hearings, it's time for the commission members to provide feedback to both the applicant and the community. So that will happen today. And then at the end of all that, we will close the hearing and continue it to June 26th for our final hearing, as far as I can tell. So with that, the list of the outstanding issues, I think we still had an open issue on mitigation. So if the representatives, if Adrian and Mark are on the platform, you guys should turn on your cameras. Hello, hello. Good afternoon to you both. I think we had reached, and please everybody jump in and correct me if I don't have any of this right. We had reached agreement on the invasive vegetation management to the extent that it goes beyond jurisdictional areas into abutting upland areas to protect the jurisdictional areas from invasive vegetation moving in. I think you'll hear from folks today that there is still a desire on the part of some people that some understory vegetation be planted when in some of the bare areas that will appear. You know, to be honest, I don't know about from an ecological perspective whether that makes sense if you are transitioning or converting a wooded wetland area into a shrubland wetland area, whether understory vegetation without a canopy is the right thing to do. I think we may have to get some guidance, but nonetheless, we'll talk about how, assuming we get to an order, how that order will be constructed, which will be very process-oriented to drive some of these answers to some of these questions that will remain open. Unlike most of our applications and notices, this is not a one and done where we're going to either issue something at the end and then say go forth and do the project and submit annual reports. This is going to have a lot of moving parts that are going to continue to evolve into the future. We will have submissions coming in pursuant to the order of conditions, and we'll hold hearings to review and approve those submissions. So I think that what we realized is that trying to answer all the questions substantively before we reach the end of the hearing process wasn't feasible. We'd be doing this for a couple more years. So we're going to allow an order of conditions if we get to that point, and I'm not going to assume how this is turning out. But if we go that way, it'll provide for a process to answer some of those questions. I I know that there was still an open issue with respect to the payment of a donation to the tree replacement fund to mitigate for the trees that are being removed. We heard you that you were providing a per acre estimate figure. And I know that I heard pushback, and I'm going to allow people to jump in here and state their positions who wanted to see a per tree, recognizing that that creates uncertainty in the applicant's fiscal future because you won't know what that is until you get to that removal process. I'm going to see what people say about ideas that they've had for how to resolve that. Yeah, just in terms of the mitigation, the tree replacement fund figure.
May I interrupt?
Yes.
Since you're discussing the matter, I should probably read aloud. if that's
You know,
okay.
Yes,
we did this
sorry.
last time too, after
Yeah,
a break, didn't we?
that's
We
right.
jumped, we're so anxious to get going that we
No,
jumped right
I
in.
get it. No, I totally get
But
it.
the hearing is technically not open until you read that, so,
Right, so let's do that, and I
Sorry
would
about
love to
that.
be able to just take the addresses and say, and all those,
yep.
but I can't, so here we go. 240 and 438 George Ryder Road, 1652 Main Street, Chatham Municipal Airport, maps 9F, 240, 10G, 438, SE, 8E, 1652 Main, parcel 0-2, 240, 18K1, 438, 5327, 1652 Main Street, DEP number SE10 3658. The proposed project includes vegetation management required to remove obstructions within navigable airspace in compliance with Federal Aviation Administration FAA regulations. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Paul. Sorry for having done that again.
We're good at that.
Yeah, I know, two in a row. So Karen, you were about to,
I'm struggling with the 21,000 for the acreage because we usually, in every instance except this one, have required mitigation based off of the number of trees and where they're located. Being that in there, if they're in the NDZ, 0 to 50, it's a 2 to 1. If it's in the 50 to 100, it's a 1 to 1 replacement. And I know we don't know how many trees, which makes this all the more difficult. But I would like to try and come up with a value per tree that you would donate. And I know we don't know how many trees. So obviously this is a moving target and one of the many things that will have to be resolved as we move along and you've started your work. Can you comment on that?
Yes, before we comment on that, I would like to clarify the mitigation ratios. So I know in terms of at section 5.023B, you have, right, 1-to-1 mitigation for the outer aura and 2-to-1 for the NDZ. That's the18-based mitigation. And then in terms of the trees at section 5.023G, it states that the mitigation for tree removal for safety projects is 1-to-1. Which is then adjusted for the size of the DBH. So I'm just seeking a little clarity on that before we go too far down this conversation.
I guess that I didn't remember the safety one. And so we could, I mean, we still don't know how many trees anyway. So,
right.
1-to-1, 2 to, I think we can go with 1-to-1.
I've been assuming a 1-to-1 in terms of the funds available in the tree replacement fund to plant trees elsewhere would be at a 1-to-1.
Right. So that's fine, but we do still, I just have a real problem using acreage rather than trees since we hold everyone, the town, everyone to the 1-to-1 the tree replacement standard. So putting a dollar value, and I'm not knowledgeable on cost of trees.
Most of us aren't, but luckily.
Luckily, we have somebody.
We do have people with experience both at the retail, commercial, and wholesale, that's it, trees. So maybe he can shed some light, Eric, on what the costs would be of planting.
Well, usually, your wholesale, most of the trees being taken out are probably oaks and pines, I would imagine. I don't know what the replacement on a pine is. You can't really buy pitch pines of any size, but let's say for a general size oak tree at a 2.5-inch caliper, the wholesale would be roughly around the tree's worth about $350. Let's say wholesale. So if you any tree that's well over 2.5 calipers should be, in my opinion, would be categorized at a minimum 2.5-inch caliper replacement. And I know I hear, oh well, you can get a replacement tree for $15 and they grow better and all this, but that's not really the value of the tree to me being taken out. So even if you took the 350 and slashed it in half, or rounded off to 150, that would still be $75 more a tree than what you were kind of mentioning. But I just don't think the value of actually, in my opinion, they're priceless. But if you had to do it, I would think a 2.5 caliper price would be minimum, and that's even really half of that. So that's where I stand.
So in my comments that we're going to see later, the thing on mitigation was that I thought the financial contribution needed to be revisited. I appreciated Eric's comments in the last meeting, and this is even better. $15 a tree is absurd. And I think we need to really look at that carefully. On the other hand, I appreciate the gesture to financially contribute to the number of trees. And the tree count is absolutely critical. The final tree count, not the estimated tree count. So that's my thought.
I am concerned about setting a precedence for other applications that if we let you do by acre and we're making everybody else go by tree, other people are going to just say, we want to do by acre too. So I am concerned for all the other things that have been said, but I really am concerned about the precedence that it sets.
Thank you. Anybody else? Bob? Mary, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, if we do receive compensation for these trees, the town meeting just passed bylaw that tells any trees that are coming out, they're going to have to be replaced on town property. So this would be a good fund to do that with. So it comes at a good time.
Agreed. Mary, you look like you don't have a hand up, but you look like you're.
Yes.
Good.
So I was waiting for Bob to finish. No, I look at it slightly differently in that I come from the energy industry, and so I think of everything in terms of carbon credits. And the total dollars you came up with don't even come up to last year's RGGI standards, a clearing price of $13.90 a ton. I mean, to me, that would be the basic level that you'd have to replace, because you are taking out so much of the carbon footprint by removing all these trees. So again, it's going to be very hard for us to have a dollar per acre price for other clients, for other members of the community. So I think, and there's also no incentive to try to minimize the number of trees. If you're just saying, okay, well, we already paid, $7,500, we can clear whatever we want. So that's my concern. And just so that, if you look at any of the carbon standards, the cost of these 239 trees equates to approximately 27,000.
May not be all
Data
the
point.
trees.
Yeah, that's, yeah, right, exactly. Bob, you had started to speak on the platform there. You're currently muted. There you go.
Can you hear me? So,
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I don't have much to add, really, just, I don't disagree with anything that anyone has said. I just want to make sure we keep in mind that the actual cost of replacing the trees requires ongoing care for a while. So I think that it was said that the town would take care of it, but I'm a little unclear exactly how that would happen and how they'd be watered and so forth. So I know in other similar cases, someone has to be paid to take care of them, to water them. Just make sure that we close the loop on that part of the overall cost. That's it.
Okay, and I think where I stand is just rather pretty much aligned with where everyone is. I think that I don't know about what the values are, wholesale and retail of trees. I did ask somebody else who said, she was basing it off of something smaller than 2.5 caliper. She was looking more at like 1.5. And was saying that was somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 for something that small. So when I looked at that and said, well, at $100, if we take your assessment of 250 trees, perhaps, again, we don't know, that would bring it to $37,500. I do agree with Mary that on a per-tree basis, does provide incentive to think really carefully about which trees are coming out and which may not need to come out because they may not actually reach up into the obstruction zone. So I think that's a helpful way of thinking about it. What is your reaction?
I have a fair amount, so I'll try to go in an orderly way. First off, in terms of trying to decentivize removing trees, we don't have to by putting a price per tree on that. We're not removing trees we don't have to remove. So if it's below the allowable height threshold, we're not removing it. So even if we said every tree costs $1 million, that wouldn't change which trees have to come out. So I do want to be clear that we've already minimized our impact by proposing selective clearing of only trees that at the time of clearing exceed the maximum allowable height threshold. Trees below that height will be left in place. So I just want to make sure everyone's very clear on that matter. I also want to talk about the goal in replacing these trees. They are acting as a forest, and so the goal would be to create a forest. We work on a lot of projects that involve parks and street trees, landscape trees, and we purchase and we specify large caliber trees for those purposes so that they are providing that shade immediately, that park place of feel immediately, that sense of place. Restoration projects, which we do many wetland restorations for work in wetlands, adjacent to wetlands, it is much more advisable and much more appropriate to be planting smaller trees. Not because of the cost, but it is less disturbing to them to be planted when they are smaller, their roots are more intact, they have a better survival rate, and they're healthier, and they grow more quickly. So that is why we propose a smaller tree. And we do use one nursery primarily. It's the native plant wholesale nursery for wetland restoration in Massachusetts. And this is the size tree they grow. It's a 2-gallon container, so it's a small container, but it's a tall tree, 4 to 6 feet tall. And the trees, as we said, they're $13 to $15 per tree, depending on the species. We can buy pitch pine, we can buy white oak, we can buy white pine. And those are primarily the species that are out there. We also looked at RS means, which is a professional method for engineering estimates. It's used for all sorts of engineering needs, from pouring foundations and building walls to planting trees. And the RS means value to plant this size tree is $22.90 a tree. And that does break it out in terms of how many trees can be planted per day. It includes a markup for the landscape contractor. So that is what the RS means value says. So put together, that comes out to about $38 per tree, which, you know, with a area-based donation as we propose, it's about 200 trees per acre. 200 trees per acre is in line with Penn State's Extension School recommendation for restoring forests for wildlife habitat, because that density, it allows for robust seed production and canopy growth. So that's my understanding is that's the goal in replacing the trees, is to replace the forest for the interests of the Wetland Protection Act and the town bylaw, which include the wildlife habitat component of it, versus a carbon credit perspective or a street tree perspective, that it's to establish an area of forest.
Right.
And that these funds are a reasonable donation to establish an area of forest similar to the area removed, absolutely acknowledging that forests take time to grow.
Right. Yes, I agree completely that, and one of the challenges that we would be facing in going down this route is, yes, the goal would be to replace the woodland that has been lost. That said, that the challenge is trying to find a place that is suitable, where it can be recreated. That's not necessarily an easy task to do, but there are some areas in the town where there are places that could be suitable candidates. Don't know how long it will take for all this to happen, but that is the goal. Certainly not shade trees, certainly not street trees, certainly not anything else like that. This is replacement of an ecosystem that is being converted. So, well, let me ask what people think about Adrienne, what she just said.
Well, the only thing you can't buy is time. So the way it is now, it's there, and it's already established. And then the other option is taking it down and waiting for it to reestablish. So the difference is time. Thanks.
Also, keep in mind, you're not actually getting the trees and planting them and caring for them. So the price that you're quoting is, who you use. I don't know that that's who our town uses, and that we actually have the ability to, get a tree for that same $15 or so. And that's why I think we were thinking it should be higher, because we don't know what it will cost to replace these trees.
Right. There's also the costs of installing, of doing the planting, and to
Exactly.
Bob's point, the costs of maintaining them until you get past the initial period where survival is riskier. So I've just been making notes here, and added to the $38 per tree, a cost for that care
Yeah,
per tree gets me to about 50.
at least.
That's on the low end of what we've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if we are saying, which I'm sort of hearing, that, and at least I'm saying, that I don't think even whatever, $15 a tree, $38 a tree, whatever it is, I still think that's low. And I think we're all saying that it needs to be per tree, not acre. And we know that that's an unknown, and that, we're going by your estimates, which, as you've said, are estimates, and as knowledgeable as you can be, given that it's a forest, and you've got to clear to see where the next group has, what passes or does not pass. I think we're all saying it has to be per tree.
I don't hear pushback particularly on that point.
Right.
I think you're prepared. I'm hearing some of the calculations you were engaged in are looking at the per tree model.
But then we
That's-
have to come to an agreement on a value per tree.
Right.
Right. I look at the value of what the trees are there, not what they could be when they're planted or,
Yeah.
I try to look at what's in front of my eyes, and that's the tree that's there. What's the value of the tree?
Yeah, but isn't the tree replacement fund designed to fund the replacement tree?
Exactly.
Not so, yeah.
Right, but-
Which is not going to be equal to what's
No.
coming out. Right, we
No.
all know that, right?
Right, that's why,
It's that time element that you were saying, because the replacement trees will take decades maybe to get to the
at
point.
that size, yes.
Yeah.
So my question is, oh, sorry, Adrian, just for a sec. Is it our purview to decide the price of the tree, or is it whoever's going to administer this tree fund?
Well, but the question is, how much is the donation into the tree fund
I know,
to
but
compensate? And,
should
I mean,
they-
that's just it's more precise to do it on a per tree basis.
totally
based
get
on
that.
the inventory when they finish
I
the
totally-
cutting. And then we have a number, we know how many, and
Mm-hmm.
at that point, I mean, we don't have to resolve this today, and it doesn't look like we're going to be able to. We can agree that on the process, we've talked before about monitoring the removal process. We could set that up in the order, the inventory once the removal is done, and then a donation amount based on the number of trees that were removed, that number to be determined.
Because my question is, I totally want them to be counted. But my question is it us to do the price, or whoever's administering this fund so that they do it uniformly through the town of Chatham?
The
Even for
problem
people
is-
who aren't
Oh,
coming
I
to
see.
The
conservation.
fund isn't set up
I know,
yet.
that's
Not
what I'm
there
We
yet.
don't
wondering.
have
Right.
that person yet, so.
I know.
Right.
We're
Which
the
is a
cart
good
before the
reason,
horse.
which is a reason not to resolve
We're setting precedents
this
for
now.
that too.
Yes.
Is what I'm saying, is
You're right.
whatever we tell them,
You're right,
we're
but
deciding what the tree's gonna cost
kinda
for
stuck.
everybody.
Could the tree warden help us with this?
Well, that will be the person who is
We
yet
don't-
to be named.
Yeah.
Oh,
We have an interim tree warden at the moment, but we don't have the permanent person under the
Right.
new tree protection bylaw.
Because in the future, we may not be replacing a forest, we may be replacing a shade tree along, I don't know,
Yeah.
Main Street. And that might want to be a bigger tree, so we don't want to set the price for a tree, I don't know.
But we kind of, at
I
some
know
point, we have to.
It's in our lap right now, I'm just curious if
Yeah.
we want to be responsible for this long-term.
I
No,
think
but
we're
we're not
going to do the
experts.
best we can.
Exactly.
We're going to do the best we can, given that we don't have, we're setting precedent.
Yeah,
We
I mean,
know
I think one of the things that when we talked about monitoring the removal process, one of the things that we would want to insist on is that be an independent certified arborist. And we may want to take consultation with that person or somebody like that in terms of what's been removed and what will be replaced. And I think that, it's not, we could probably work out a process in the order to allow that to go forward in consultation with the arborist, in consultation with the tree warden,
And
to
our
arrive at a
agent.
figure. And the agent, yeah.
A lot of people.
Yeah, well, it's a
Yeah.
complex proposition. So,
Can I just say one more thing?
this is what we're here for today.
So I know I cut you off, Adrian, but I did want to say that I'm fascinated with this idea that you have about establishing the shrubland. I think that's a really good idea, really good use, and you're not just leaving this space to become whatever it wants to become. So I really appreciate that you have thought through and have presented that you have done this with purpose and trying to replace what you're taking. So I do appreciate that.
Thank you. Yes, what I was going to say before is, obviously, right, we all know trees take time to grow. That's, stating the obvious. There are, under the Wetland Protection Act, when you do a wildlife habitat evaluation, you look at the habitat that's there, you look at the work, and you look if the habitat will be put back. And those standards for no adverse effect when you put the habitat back, they say, will the habitat be established in 2 years from the completion of work, with the exception of trees. So there is a time lag, but that is accepted in the Wetland Protection Act through the Wildlife Habitat Evaluation guidelines and standards to say, right, if the shrubs, they need to be back within 2 years following construction. They need to be a robust growth for us to say that shrub grew successfully, it rebounded successfully following tree removal. But the trees are allowed to be on a longer timeline, just given the realities of what you can buy, successfully plant, establish, and grow versus what was there. And I also do want to just identify, while it's a different set of regulations, the Army Corps of Engineers has restoration standards, and they actually have a standard for, right, if you go into a forested wetland and you cut it all down, you fill it, you're going to build something. You have to mitigate at a certain standard. But if you're going to go in and you're going to cut the trees and leave a shrubland, their standard is that you only owe 15% of the mitigation you would owe otherwise, because you still have a naturalized shrubland and that has value. So that's not a per tree basis, but those are how other regulations do look at tree replacement and tree mitigation. Is if you're going to take the trees and turn it into a parking lot, it's very significant. You owe quite a bit. But if you're going to take the trees and turn it into a shrubland, that mitigation, that compensatory mitigation standard is much lower because you still have water cleaning from the naturalized area, stabilization, and other values.
Yes, you haven't removed 100% of the vegetation that was existing in the area. You removed some much lesser percentage, leaving all of the shrubs in place. So that makes sense that would be a lesser standard.
And that may allay some of the precedent concerns that other town projects in the future may say, well, we only want to give $7,500, or we only want to give $40 per tree. But this is a context-specific offer, given that there's going to be a naturalized area that will be adaptively managed as a shrubland, and there is twice the, 2 times the invasive species management of the area. So it's just a unique situation compared to we want to cut this tree for a view, or we want to cut down these trees to make a lawn, a park, whatever. So that future projects could be considered on their impacts and merit, not dependent on our agreement.
The only thing I feel about turning a forest into a shrubland is that as much as it still has viability and habitat and species are there and all that, it's nowhere near the carbon impact of a forest. A shrubland just isn't. So that's my only thought about that. The climate change involved is, especially in an environment like Cape Cod and Chatham, it's concerning to me. I'm totally understanding of the change. I'm totally aware that a shrubland has value, but it isn't trees.
Well, you lose the carbon, and there's no way to recapture carbon that you've lost.
I've noticed that the summers are getting hotter too. That also I'm concerned about. Let me ask you a question. Is this one of the most unusual projects you've had, this type of project in this town, for this little town that has very little upland to all the bodies of water? Is this kind of unique to all the projects you have had?
Is that a question to me?
Yes, that's a question to you.
Oh, no.
No?
No.
What other
We've done
town have you had
vegetation.
that this little town like this, surrounded by 3 sides of oceans and loaded with ponds and one lake, that had airport with a vernal pool?
There's several airports along the South Shore and the South Coast that have had significant vegetation management. In the town of Marshfield.
Marshfield is, what size is Chatham compared to Marshfield? I'm asking what size of a
Geographically, I'm
little...
not sure, but the airport in Marshfield is surrounded by 2 tidal rivers, one on either runway end.
Right, but this is a very small little town, right?
Marshfield's big.
Which
Yeah.
Marshfield's a very big town. So our upland land to bodies of water compared to other towns you've done is a small piece of land, right? Have you had any other towns as small as Chatham for upland?
You know, I'm not sure the relative upland to wetland size of each
I
municipality.
mean, no,
in
as
which
far
I've
as
worked.
land, of upland land, period. In other
You know, I
words,
can't speak to the relative upland size of municipalities. What I can speak to is the size of vegetation management that's been proposed for various projects around the Commonwealth.
all right, how about the size of town?
Right, I've stated, I am not sure the geographic size of towns and their relative proportion of uplands to wetlands throughout the Commonwealth.
All right. That's it.
Okay. Well, having come close but not resolved this one, I'm going to just leave it for the moment because we have a number of other things that we do need to get to. This is an open issue. We'll have to figure out how to close that at some point. But at this point, I would like to, what I have on my list here is any questions from commission members. Now, there's been volumes of materials that you have submitted on behalf of the applicant. Lots of questions have been asked by the commenters about those materials. Many responses from you have been provided. Those responses have generated further questions, which have generated further responses. So I feel like we've gone around and around, but I know that people still might have a question, and one that I still have because it's come up so many times, and I have seen the questions and I have seen the responses, but I'd like to get right to it, is the issue of feasible alternatives when we're into the variance analysis for this project, because on some of the very specific variances that are requested. And it also comes up in terms of when you think about, and as I do, the foundation of all wetlands protection being comprised of avoid, minimize, mitigate. Right off the bat in the avoid section, it has been suggested that runway threshold displacement is a viable alternative. And from what we can tell, at least I can tell, that's a highly technical question that is beyond most of our ability to really drill down into. But I just wanted to ask you one more time whether it was considered as an alternative. I know you said it comes up in the environmental assessment and the finding of no significant impact documents from the FAA, and rejected as a alternative, and ask you why it was rejected. I looked at those documents and I couldn't find reasoning about why it was not considered a viable alternative here.
Hi, good afternoon. If I could jump in and address that question, Madam Chair. So
Sure.
the reason it was rejected by the FAA is because clearing trees increases the level of safety at the airport, and diminishing the availability of runway length diminishes the amount of safety at the airport. So that's why that alternative was rejected.
So, but if you, and correct me, this is my apologies for being, ignorant about some of this, but it seems to me that if you've pushed the zone on the runway further down the runway, and you've changed then not the angle, but you've changed the area that you've heightened over the existing trees, why does that not provide a relative margin of safety? Because you are now coming over the obstructions at a higher altitude before you come down to the runway.
Sure, it's because you're reducing the amount of available runway length to land on. So the FAA looks at various safety factors, And clearing trees is it's a much safer alternative because you can keep in place the runway length for landing and takeoff. But if you move more of the approach surface onto the airport, you reduce the availability of runway length.
But for most of the aircraft that use this airport, they don't require the full runway length. They require only some much smaller, area of it, right?
That's not necessarily true.
Why not?
In what case
Because
isn't it true?
it depends on the type of aircraft.
But,
So we can go back and look at the design aircraft and take a look at what the master plan said. I mean, I don't have that information
Yeah,
off the
this
top
is
of
where
my
it gets
head,
too technical.
but that has been factored in, that's been considered by the FAA, and that's the reason why that alternative was rejected in the master plan and also rejected in the environmental assessment.
Bob has his hand up. Bob Rawls, I think you may want to respond to that. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. I guess, just to continue on this, the commenters on this project have given us examples of other airports, some local airports, other larger airports within Massachusetts, a number of which are using displacement to apparently avoid obstructions. So the question is, why was that allowed for them, and why would it not similarly work in Chatham?
Those are good questions. I'm actually glad you brought that up. I mean, I can't speak for reasons why displaced thresholds have occurred at other airports in the Commonwealth. I can tell you because I did receive the correspondence from one of the individuals who stated that. And one of the examples that they cited was Mansfield. Mansfield has a displaced threshold on the runway 32 end. We literally just cleared trees to remove the displaced threshold on that runway 32 end. And there's a certified vernal pool at the end of that runway, which we did tree clearing in the actual vernal pool, as well as the adjacent areas to it. So that's one example of where there's a displaced threshold, and literally the town and the FAA worked to remove that displaced threshold because having additional runway length is safer than mitigating with displaced thresholds to clear trees. Another example that was cited was Turners Falls Airport out in Turners Falls, Massachusetts. The runway 34 end is currently displaced due to terrain. That has nothing to do with trees. There's a massive hill that's in the way out there. And I will note that the airport is looking to do a 1,000-foot runway extension, which is shown on their airport layout plan. So again, further proving that additional runway length is safer than displacing thresholds. The other example was North Adams, where there's a displaced threshold, and again, that's due to terrain, that is not due to trees. There's hills, there's mountains in the way that necessitates the need for displaced thresholds.
All right, so here's my follow-up question to that. I wouldn't disagree with the statement that longer runways are safer. But the question to me is, with displacement, Chatham, which would avoid removal of trees, would it be sufficiently safe?
I think that's a matter for FAA to make a determination on and flight procedures. I mean, I'm not in a position to tell you that just because you clear trees and displace the threshold that that's sufficiently safe.
Well, it would seem to be a fundamental question.
Again, I'm not in a position to address a fundamental safety question of, I mean, if you avoided trees, certainly it would be safer. But having the full runway length, the 3,000 feet, has been proven to be safer than just displacing the thresholds to clear trees. And that's why the airport went through and the FAA vetted this through a master plan and then subsequently through the environmental assessment. I mean, I don't know how much more I can state other than that. I mean, it's been documented and it's up on the town's website.
Okay, so that's, I guess that in my thinking, that still leaves it open as, at least from a technical perspective, from a logical perspective, an alternative. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
That's fine. Alternatives that have been vetted and rejected.
Right, Matt, I was going to ask, that alternative was asked of the FAA, and the FAA denied displaced thresholds.
That is correct.
So that is not an alternative for
For
us
that reason?
not the FAA to pursue.
It was rejected by the FAA for the safety reason, for the runway length that's remaining?
That is correct. It did not meet the purpose and need of the airport. And safety was a factor included as part of that.
All right, one more follow-up then, or two follow-ups actually, just to make sure that we have the piece of paper where the FAA said that. But did they say that with respect to what I'm referring to as the current, let's just call it the narrow, roughly 200-foot wide runway approach? Or did they reject it for the wider, let's call it the 500-foot wide runway approach? Did they distinguish between the two, or were they referring to the wider approach?
So the existing approach is 400 feet in width. It's not the narrower 200 feet that you're referencing. And the environmental assessment was expressly based on the existing approach surface, which is 400 feet at its inner point, at its inner width. And that is what the EA was based on.
All right, well, we'll get into the 400, 500, and 200 later, but their denial is based on a 400-foot wide runway approach. Okay.
That is correct.
All right.
Okay. Any other follow-ups to that? I will note one thing I did discover in my quest to understand this issue and what the safety concerns were, was coming across an FAA guidance document for the use of displacement where there are obstructions in the approach zone. And they did note that while that is one way to avoid the problem, the trees, and as well as poles and chimneys, anything else that remains must be lighted for safety purposes. And when I read that, and I thought, well, that's a bit of a deal breaker in terms of trees. That is not something that we would want to see done, putting lights on them. So that changed a little bit of the way I was thinking about it. Adrian, you have your hand up. Or is that just a?
Yes. No, I previously provided to the Conservation Commission a hard copy of the guidance document for conservation commissions when considering airport vegetation management plans. And it does note on the very back page, it has a statement about FAA waivers. And it reads, FAA waivers from the obstruction clearing standards may, on rare occasion, be issued for extreme cause. And it goes on to cite that Norwood Airport did receive a waiver, but that it was in an ACEC, had 3 rare species with the take, was in the middle of a large wetland making access difficult, and further that they still did quite a bit of tree cutting to minimize that displacement. So in the town of Norwood, they actually cut 100.7 acres of vegetated wetland.
Did see that. Said that was
And had to displace. So that is, it happens. It is, as acknowledged by DEP, rare, unique, and for extreme cause.
Okay. All right, other questions before we move on to statements? Any other questions? I think most of them have, that was the only one that I had. Bob, go ahead, Bob.
I do have, I have some.
Yep.
I didn't know we were going to get to this part of it this fast, so let me call up my notes.
Well, we're not to your statement yet. We're just asking if there's any clarifying
Okay, well,
questions.
yeah,
But you can start it, yeah.
No, not quite yet, no. So this has to do with the runway width again. And I've seen a
Bob,
lot
people
of-
in the room are having trouble hearing you. Can you,
Okay, I'll lean forward.
yep, lean forward.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm a long way away, so.
He's in Alaska, so he's.
We've seen a number of numbers having to do with the width of the runway and what is the quote current unquote width of the runway, what is approved, what is desired, and so forth. And I'm still fuzzy on it, and I still can't really get a handle on it. I know the airport is saying that the runway width is wider, has been wider for some period of time than what is indicated in the airport map, which is associated with the Chatham Airport bylaw, which was the item, of course, that was before town meeting recently. And so, I also know that there's a desire on the part of the airport to essentially cut more vegetation than the cut vegetation that would be required for an additional type of landing, which is referred to normally as straight in, instrument guided landing with vertical guidance and so forth. When that is not happening now at the airport, and correct me as I go along here for anything I'm saying that's wrong. So is it 400? Is 400 feet now that is approved by the FAA, or is assumed by the FAA, or is published by the FAA, or is published by the town, or is approved by the Chatham bylaw, the airport bylaw? What is the exact width of the airport? I just see too many different numbers.
Yeah, I mean, so I just pulled up the FAA's design AC, if you don't mind if I jump in here.
Please do.
And so FAA flight procedures at some point in time, so you do have the bylaw map, which shows, I think it's 250 feet at the inner width. At some point in time, FAA flight procedures published a non-precision approach at Chatham Airport. They have a GPS, approach to runway 24 and runway 6. That is considered a non-precision approach. If you go to table 3-3, non-precision and IFR circling approach surfaces from the FAA's AC, the inner width or the beginning width of the approach surface is 400 feet. The outer width is 3,400 feet at a point 10,000 feet from that starting point. So that is where that comes from. That is what's approved. That is what FAA flight procedures has published for Chatham Airport. That is what we're looking to clear to. We can talk about LPV approaches all day long. They're completely irrelevant to what the airport's looking to do. They're completely irrelevant to tree clearing that the airport is looking to undertake as part of this project. The Airport Commission, Gale Associates, GZA cannot implement or publish approaches on behalf of airports. That is strictly in the purview of FAA flight procedures. So I'm not even sure why discussing LPV approaches would even be necessary as part of this discussion. But to answer your question, the inner surface or the inner approach surface is 400 feet in width.
All right, so, but instrument guided straight in approach is or isn't currently authorized for Chatham Airport by the FAA?
There are no straight in LPV instrument approaches published at Chatham as we speak today. That is correct.
All right, and would that approach require more than the 400 feet that you speak of?
Negative.
It would be the same width?
That would be for FAA flight procedures to determine, but there is nothing that suggests that that width would change.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just see if I can screen share here. I'm having trouble screen sharing today. So, Matt, just to follow up on that, let's see if I can do this. That one. There we go. So, in my quest for understanding what is existing and when I looked at the airport layout plan and the master plan update, in both cases it referenced existing and proposed approach surfaces. And this is figure 5.2 this is from the master plan, and it says existing Part 77 approach surfaces, and I'll zoom in. are done at 250 feet. And then there's a subsequent, and that's on both the north and the south end.
Yep,
On other
exactly.
maps, it says proposed, and that's where the 400 feet. So can you help us understand why this is, the existing, it seems consistently referred to as this 250 feet area that starts 200 feet back from the end of the runway?
Yep, and so when we started the master plan process with the airport, we were using existing because it was consistent with the approach bylaw. And like I said, at some point, FAA flight procedures published a non-precision instrument approach at Chatham Airport. That in and of itself expanded that runway width. So what's proposed in there, what's proposed as part of the 2000, and I think it was actually started in 17, master plan, that is now the existing approach surface width for the airport because of that non-precision GPS approach.
And when you say the FAA published that, what does that actually mean?
So they have what you call approach plates. So when pilots are dialing up to go to an airport, they can pull down the approach plates and figure out how they can get into the airport, what the visibility minimums are, what the height minimums are when flying in, because those do change at airports. They're not all the same. Things like terrain and trees and everything else come into play on stuff like that. So those approach plates get published by FAA flight procedures. They actually go and evaluate the airports on I think it's on a continuous basis to determine what type of approaches can become available at various airports. And in the case of Chatham, they deemed the GPS non-precision approach to be a safe approach for the airport. Unfortunately, trees have since grown. The existing approach surface has become what is that proposed approach surface in there, and that's what the airport is looking to clear.
So that happened subsequent to the preparation of the master plan update that says in its recommendation section, in an effort to maximize the utility of the airport, particularly in less than ideal weather, the airport should coordinate with FAA flight procedures to publish a non-precision approach to runway 624. This process will involve, at a minimum, identifying obstructions to runway 624, removing obstructions within the easements, and conducting a survey.
That's correct. Yeah, so I don't know exactly when the GPS approach was published, but the airport was interested in pursuing that LPV straight-in approach, and that's where the discussion for getting into tree clearing and talking about the airport approach surface comes into play. That's where the term LPV has come into play, because the airport was looking to put in or work and coordinate with flight procedures to get the safest possible approaches into Chatham, and that was deemed to be the LPV approach.
So what I've got
And
up here...
that would be that surface there. That's the surface, correct.
So when just help us again with this, when that happens, how does it take effect? What does the FAA do to effectuate that kind of a change?
Honestly, we just discovered it through their approach plates. I don't know what their notification process is. I don't even know if it's, broadly casted. But there are approach plate books that they issue, and it's up on, you can download that stuff online as well.
But this was, so you're saying this was initiated entirely by the FAA, not at the request
that's correct.
of Chatham Airport, despite some of the language in the master plan and in the layout plan that indicate that it was a recommendation that Chatham seek this.
Yeah, that's correct. Like I said, I don't know exactly the date, and I can probably ask for that and see when they publish the non-precision approach.
Okay. Other questions on this issue?
I'm.
Yes, Jen? Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I want to follow up. So the narrative that was just presented suggests that the FAA unilaterally published this approach and not necessarily at the request of Chatham Airport.
Right.
Does that would be a fair statement?
Yeah. I have no knowledge of Chatham Airport requesting a non-precision GPS approach.
So the current 400-foot wide airport would support that type of landing?
Which type of a landing? LPV?
LPV, yes.
It's possible. So when we were going through the master plan process, because there's other plans in there as well that show a surface that's called the GQS surface, which is 30:1. Not to get too technical, when we were originally coordinating with flight procedures, talking about various approaches in an LPV approach, the reason we coordinated with flight procedures is because in the design AC at that point in time, it said that there needed to be a clear GQS approach, which is another surface. We worked with FAA flight procedures. They said that that's not necessarily true, that they could implement and publish an LPV approach on a clear 20:1 surface, which is what the airport shows in their master plan with their current approach and with their proposed approach. That was a 20:1 surface. So it is possible that Chatham could get an LPV approach with a clear 20:1, but with, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, she's just showing me something. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, no worries. So yeah, with a clear 20:1 approach, it's possible that FAA flight procedures could publish an LPV approach, but it is not guaranteed. And obviously, flight procedures can't go out and evaluate that because there's trees that are in the way and that are complicating the approach surface for them to evaluate that type of approach. So it is possible. To answer your question, it is possible. Is it guaranteed for Chatham? It's definitely not guaranteed.
But as Janet indicated, the airport apparently is interested in that and has that as a goal.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just asking for confirmation on that.
Yeah, no, they would definitely like to see an LPV approach if it is possible and feasible to get that into the airport, yes.
But for that approach to be approved by the FAA, they would not need to cut vegetation wider than the 400, let's call it the 400-foot wide runway.
That is correct. So we're seeking to clear trees to the existing approach surface, which is that 400-foot width. If after all those trees are cleared, FAA flight procedures is able to implement an LPV approach at Chatham, they're going to do so. If for some reason flight procedures criteria changes or is different, or the 400-foot width of trees that are cleared isn't sufficient, then they're not going to be able to implement an LPV approach. That's just kind of how it goes.
It's a separate authorization process in the future.
If they were to clear beyond the 400-foot?
No, you already said that 400-foot is currently authorized.
That's correct.
Without having straight-in landing.
That is correct.
And so if the airport wanted straight-in landing, they would have to go through another process after this vegetation would be removed to obtain that approval.
That's correct. What they would do is the airport would go into they call it the ADIP. It's their information portal. They would go in and they would identify those trees as having been mitigated or clear. And then they could coordinate with FAA flight procedures to do an evaluation where flight procedures would go out and fly the approaches and determine if they could get LPV or any other type of approach the airport may be interested in getting in there.
Okay. One more question, just to circle back a bit. When was the 400, maybe you've said it, and maybe it's in the documentation, but there are, it seemed like thousands of pages submitted. So when was the 400-foot wide runway published?
Yeah, that I just mentioned, I don't know. I'd have to check with flight procedures to see when that was published.
All right, thank you.
That would be helpful information to have, just because that's a gap in what we see. For example, in this image, this is from the airport layout plan, uses language of the existing Part 77 approach surface, which appears to be in the black, although it's hard to say, but that
Yellow.
That's the obstruction-free zone, but I think that's probably the same, as opposed to the proposed Part 77 approach surface. Again, that seems to imply that the change is being sought by somebody, and that would be the airport, I would think. Who would be proposing that approach surface? Not the
Yeah,
FAA.
and just keep in mind the airport. So they do have a visual surface as well, and that would be that surface that's 250 feet in width. So there's the visual approach surface, and then they also have the non-precision GPS surface. So it's not like they're just limited or restricted to that one 400-foot surface. So that is in part where that visual 250-foot approach surface comes from.
Right, but I'm still questioning the use of the word proposed.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll see if I can get the date when flight procedures publish that.
And where this proposal emanated from, because I think that makes a difference. Because there is language, and I know I keep citing it, but there's language in the master plan that, and it's more than once, in an effort to maximize the utility of the airport is the phrase that introduces a number of the recommendations. So it sounds like it's emanating from the airport. And I will
Okay,
just
I'll take a look
note
at that.
here, so that this image does show the reason that we are so hyper-focused on this, because the impact to the vernal pool is obvious.
Exactly.
If in the visual approach zone, the 250-foot zone, there is very minimal impact to the outer buffer zone to it. Whereas in the GPS non-precision, it's greater. And in fact, what this doesn't show, but I guess the orange dotted line picks up, is the transition zones, which we haven't even begun to talk about, which will have to wait, since that doesn't come later. It doesn't come until later in the project. But that's why we are so focused on this, is because of the impact.
Yeah,
of the
no,
vernal
that's
pool.
fair enough. But I guess to come full circle on it, the existing approach surface, because of that non-precision GPS approach, is 400 feet in width.
Okay, I have that written down. All right. Let me get back to, I can stop sharing. All right, if there are no further questions, we have revisited this
I'm
horse
sorry, Janet,
repeatedly. Go ahead, Bob.
I want to fight. I'm just still chewing on this.
Keep going. This
Because
is our opportunity
I think it's critical that
to do this.
That we understand this, and as you say, it's fundamental. And it also forms the basis of many of the objectors' commentary. The 200 foot, you said that there's two approach surfaces authorized. There's, well, I'll refer to as the 200-foot wide surface, which you're, I think, characterizing as a visual approach surface.
Correct.
And then you say there's also an approved 400-foot wide approach surface. What is that approach surface for? Who uses it and under what conditions?
Which one? The visual?
No, the other one.
The GPS approach? Anyone that's using instrumentation for flying in and around Chatham, or flying into Chatham, or departing Chatham.
So all they had to do is just use GPS.
Yeah, it's a GPS approach. That's correct.
It has nothing to do with instrument-guided straight-in landing, or nothing to do with straight-in landing.
I guess I don't understand your question.
Well, if
for Chatham they have GPS, so they have certain waypoints when you're flying, and they hit those waypoints and they get to a specific place in the airspace where they can see the airport, and then they can continue on in and make a landing at the airport. That is what the GPS currently does.
And that would require so the landing, the approach that they would use would be the so-called 400-foot wide approach.
Yes.
If they were using
correct.
GPS to approach the airport.
That is correct.
All right. So I think to some degree I've perhaps been muddling together two different types of instrument-guided landing. I guess I assume that every airplane, not being a pilot, uses GPS to find their way to the general location of the airport. You're saying that's not necessarily true?
Somebody has their hand up.
Correct.
Hang on.
And I see Commissioner Mike Galen from the airport is on, looking to speak.
All right,
That's
good.
okay.
All right, I'll be
All
quiet
right,
here.
go ahead, Commissioner Galen, go ahead. You have something to add? You're muted, sir.
To clarify the question about instrumentation and GPS, the aircraft must be equipped with the proper GPS equipment to use a GPS approach. That's number one. And there is no instrument-guided landing in Chatham at all. That's never been part of anything. GPS just shows you where the airport is. It always has to be visual, regardless of weather conditions. If they can't see the runway, they can't land here.
Okay, I understand that, but I'm still confused a little bit, because So do all airplanes that are landing at Chatham use GPS?
No.
No.
No. So some will just have no GPS capability, and they approach the airport visually only and land if they can see the runway. And they're using ostensibly the 200-foot wide runway. That's a question.
The rule is they have to be able to have visibly see the runway at least a mile out from the runway before they can land. That's the GPS only tells you where the airport is, where the runway is. Doesn't take you in, so to speak.
Correct.
So, okay, so GPS is, so in both cases, whether they're using the 400-foot wide approach or the 200-foot wide approach, it's a visual landing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Bob, is that it for now?
For now, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Stop. Okay. So that brings us to, if there's no further questions from commissioners, we are open to any final statements from commenters, but I will say that we have received many submissions. We've reviewed all of them. We've made them all available. We've had, there's been many opportunities during these many hearings for people to speak. So I would simply ask, given the time that we've got, that if there are any further comments, they be something new that has not been brought up before, and that they be limited strictly to the matters before us under the Wetlands Protection Act and the Wetlands Protection Bylaw, and not technical matters that may have some relevance through a number of different connected issues. We need to begin our focus entirely on wetlands and performance standards. So if it's new and it's wetlands, you are invited to speak for 3 minutes. Mr. Stahl is approaching the podium.
Jerry Stahl from West Chatham. What's new is what Matt Cannon just explained. We've been waiting years to hear the confusion that Bob's brought up explained, and it never has been explained until now. It's been suspected that this tree cutting project, which claimed to be for existing conditions, that it was really clearing the way for a new airport in Chatham, an airport that would change the character of Chatham, not just the wetlands, but much more broadly by bringing in a lot of charter flights, the bigger, more noisy flights. And the reason that I bring this up in the front of a committee that's focused on the wetlands is that no other committee in Chatham or on the Cape, as far as I know, despite the referral that you made to Cape Cod Commission, no one else is considering the larger picture of what this change to the airport would be. And I really respect the fact that you are questioning this so seriously, because no one else, the select board, the zoning, planning, they've all refused to pay any attention to these issues, which are going to transform, if they go through, they're going to transform the character of the town. And so the Airport Commission has always confused things, just like Mr. Galen calling it visual when visual has a technical issue, technical meaning. He's using it in another sense. It's just confusing all the things. At least Matt Cannon laid it out fairly clearly, finally. The argument in the AMPU against the displacement was not safety. That's not what the AMPU said. The reason they didn't want the displacement. It said, and Janet read the phrase a couple times, is that the displacement would prevent basically more traffic into the city, into the town, bringing in more money for the airport manager, for businesses in town, and so on. That was the argument. And what that implies, I think, is that it's all being done to increase airplane traffic, in particular commercial charter flights. And living right under the airport path, that's something that I don't really want. And I think the town at the last annual meeting voted very clearly against this kind of change in the airport, the really expansion of the airport's role in the town. And I hope that you will stop them, because this is, if you don't turn down their request, it's the first major step towards this transformation of the airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stahl.
Can I add something?
Yes,
Madam Chair?
yes. This is our opportunity to respond and ask further questions.
To me, and I'm sure to the others up here, the big picture is the wetlands and the upland resource areas. And I hope everybody will keep into that subject, not about the increase of of course, it's in the back of our minds, but we're really concerned, to us, the wetlands is the most important in the other aura, not so much about the increased traffic in the airport and what have you. So I'd like to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, it's the only thing we can consider.
Right. At the end of the day, that's it.
Eric, I agreed with you when I'm not sure they've ever dealt with a town like Chatham with these.
Can you identify yourself, please, for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Harriet Prout.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to ask you to deny the airport this request. We watch the news, we read the Boston Globe, and there's towns all over the United States that cannot supply water to their residents. Many times it's a project or it's a company that causes this problem. It begins with a plan that to improve the town, as well as there's well-meaning townspeople encouraging that plan. There's a government bureaucrat who approves the plan, who has all the justification to approve it, and does not live in the town and does not have any feelings for the future of that town. Our town meeting in May, the Chatham residents, some living here for many years, some living here for only a few years, expressed their feelings for Chatham. They knew in their hearts, they knew in their minds that this airport plan is not a good plan. I would just like to bring up Chatham's water supply. I'm not sure exactly when I watched the online presentation. It was by the water resource analyst from the Cape Cod Commission. He spoke of Cape Cod's unique water table, the ponds feeding the aquifer feeding the ponds. He spoke of one aquifer and 6 lens. Chatham's water comes from the Monomoy lens, the same lens that also feeds Brewster, Harwich, and Orleans. Hundreds of trees are over our Monomoy lens, and they surround these ponds. They filter hundreds of gallons of water and remove pollutants. A disturbance at the pond is a disturbance to our aquifer. Our lens is under the airport. The well number 4 is across the street from the airport. Well number 4 pumps water from our Monomoy lens. All of Chatham's wells are within the Route 28 circle. The airport is within Route 28 circle. The Route 28 circle in Chatham is the only option to drill wells. Outside of Route 28, the water is salty. Our shoreline is eroding. Route 28 Circle is and will become smaller for drilling. Every year, Chatham puts up the conserve water signs because Chatham cannot meet the water supply it needs. Affordable housing is being planned. The need for more water is right now. Knowing our water comes from the Route 28 Circle, knowing water is needed now and into the future, Chatham needs to establish a plan to protect the water source, protect the Route 28 Circle, and not put Route 28 Circle in harm. Back on to that online presentation, it was called Cape Cod Sole Source Aquifer System by the Cape Cod Commission. System means all of the lenses on Cape Cod. Remember, it was one aquifer, 6 lenses. Sole Source Aquifer covers the entire Cape. One of the slide decks stated Cape Cod's aquifer was designated as a sole source aquifer on July 13, 1982, by the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, the Safe Drinking Water Act. That means that our Monomoy lens, the lens under the airport, the lens and around those ponds, the lens from which our water is pumped is designated as a sole source aquifer. It also states on that same slide deck, sole source aquifers designations preclude federal financial assistance for any project that may contaminate the aquifer. Also, if the aquifer is contaminated, it would not only pose a significant public health hazard, but there is not an existing alternative to drinking water source. That quote is from the airport's master plan from the years 1984 to 2004. So let me rephrase that. Our aquifer, if it's condemned, not condemned.
Contaminated.
Sorry, thank you, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. Contaminated. There is no existing alternative for the town of Chatham to supply water to its residents. That document also says there are 5 ponds, Black, Blue, Beardsley, White, and Emery, all adding to recharge the supply of the water in the well 4. Thank you, and I hope you deny their permit.
Thank you. Okay, all right. There's somebody on the line, online, who has a hand up. Laura Slivka? Lara?
If you're talking, you're muted.
You're muted, but you are recognized to speak. Okay.
Okay.
All right, there is a lady in the room then who apparently would like to.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Something new and something wetlands.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Paula Lofgren, Chatham. Actually, I am following up. My questions have to do with something totally boring compared to the reams of information you have. For the record, I'm for displaced thresholds. I'm against this project in any way, shape, or form, just to make that clear. I'm also a former member of the Airport Commission. So I have a question that has been discussed here, and that is funding. 2 questions were asked by a member of the commission last month one about the donation to the Tree Reparation Fund, and also how any increase in the budget amount would affect the Airport Commission's budget. And so I have a couple of questions, if I may, clarification questions on how this whole project is going to be funded. It's my understanding that the president...
interrupt you for a moment and say, since you're asking a question through the chair, I will ask the representatives if they're willing to respond questions that are directed to them from this person.
I do believe Gale Associates would be able to answer the questions.
Okay.
Are they willing?
Are you, Mark and Matt, are you willing to hear the questions?
Certainly, you can hear
You're
the
going to
questions.
be asked,
I mean,
you're to respond anyway in a few minutes to what was said, so you might as well do it in real time.
sure. No, if we can answer the questions, we will.
Okay, all right.
Are you able to do funding questions, or I can just put these thoughts out to you? I heard that the amount is 1.2 million for this project, and that last meeting, it was stated that the funding has not been sought yet to complete this entire project. If it is like other capital improvement projects at the airport, there's a standard funding. And from what I heard is that you are going to be seeking grant funding for this entire project, including the donation to the tree fund. The tree fund will not come from the airport funds. It will come from public tax money, which is what FAA grants are and Mass DOT grants are. So the standard funding is 90% of a project is federal funds, FAA grant, with a 20-year contract with the FAA that they, for lack of a better expression, own you. 5% comes from Mass DOT, and that also comes with what's known as grant assurances for 20 years. That final 5% is supposed to come from the airport. It's called local share, and in my time on the Airport Commission, I investigated this, and yes, it is supposed to come from the airport. Why? So that they're invested in this own project with money from their own coffers. So 5% of $1.2 million is $60,000, and that's before the upgrade of how much an individual tree is going to cost. The airport is not self-funding. And so what happens when the grants go forward is that the airport will write a town meeting warrant article for the remaining 5% of any capital project. And so my question to Gale Associates was going to be, is this the funding schemata that you see? For whatever this project costs, 90% FAA, public funds, 5% Mass DOT public funds, and then you'll be coming to the town, the residents who are opposed to this project, to ask for a warrant article to fund the final piece of this project. And as a taxpayer, a homeowner, believing in the doing the best you can to mitigate climate change, I find it horrifying that if that is the possibility, that they will come to town meeting and ask us to pay for something I find reprehensible.
Okay.
And that is the cutting of all these trees
Okay.
in the wetland.
I'm going to stop you at this point
Thank
because this
you.
is well beyond the purview of wetlands protection. And I'm not sure it's relevant to what we are doing here. That breakdown has always been what, at least I've understood, the funding of these kinds of capital projects in the town are. I don't know whether Gale Associates has anything
I can
say.
touch on it briefly, but
Yeah,
for this particular project, the funding breakdown is a little bit different. The FAA is picking up a portion of the cost at 90%, 5%, and 5%. Approximately 33% of this project will be funded by the FAA, and the other 67% will be funded by Mass DOT at an 80%, 20% split. So 80% being Mass DOT will pick up that portion of the 67% of the project, while the town of Chatham will be picking up the other 20%.
So my question to you, or my plea to you, is to not fund it, not to vote no on these variances. And as a product of the 60s, I'll end with Joni Mitchell. You don't know what you've lost till it's gone. And I'm not talking about the airport, because the airport will always be there. I'm talking about all the trees. Thank you for all the time and effort that you have put in there, and all the questions you asked today.
Thank
They're
you.
very important questions.
Thank you. Thank you, appreciate that. Whoop, don't trip over that. All right. Is that it for the final comments from Mark?
There's
Doesn't want to
still
say
that
something. There's
LS.
still Lara Slivka, but, oh, there she
Hi.
is. Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I had some technical difficulties there. I'm not a town of Chatham resident. I am from Orleans. So is that okay if I speak or not?
As long as it's about Wetlands Protection Act and something that we haven't heard before, and it's 3 minutes or less, yes.
Okay. So the mitigation, as you guys know, is allowed in the regulations as identified earlier, especially for safety means. And the commission has the hard job to identify what the mitigation is going to be. I think that the shrubland is excellent, an excellent idea. Another option could have been fields for bluebird and quail habitat. So, I mean, personally, I think that the shrubs are great. I do want to say that when Kristen Andres was the agent, there was precedent sent by a gentleman who did clear cut to the water. And my recollection is that the replantings and fines were negotiated and didn't follow the then current regulations. Additionally, I know that everybody is concerned about precedent, but this isn't your typical residential project. And I think that a little bit difference in leeway and perspective. You have to think about what really, what is happening, and you know, maybe some other ideas instead of having a per tree cost estimate, some educational information at the site. I know that there used to be a group of ladies who used to walk in there and they would look at everything that was there. So some educational information such as signage for exemplary native habitat shrubland area could be really helpful for the community. And that's just an alternative. I got to say that the idea of a displaced threshold, as a pilot, I did my first landing and takeoff by myself. I was very thankful for the 3,000 feet. And now I have lots of more hours, and I'm still very thankful for all 3,000 feet. I only fly a single prop airplane, and it doesn't require 3,000 feet for takeoff and landings, but sometimes I do use it. And so decreasing the runway lengths less than 3,000 feet, I feel like would be unsafe. There's a lot of people who are talking about stuff that they really don't know about. And, you know, precision and non-precision approaches, I have to say that I just learned what they meant. And I've been flying for a couple years now. I guess that's it. That's all I have to comment right now for basically on wetlands regulations. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your, so let me turn to the applicant and its representatives, whether, oh wait, Bob, you'll get a chance in 1 second, whether you have any final statements to make before we begin internal deliberations. Or have you said everything there you have to say? Okay. Okay.
Is that a question for
Yep,
the project
you,
team?
for Matt, Mark, and Adrian.
Oh, sure. Okay. Just again, want to reiterate the surface is existing. It's out there. We're clearing to that surface. The airport. Actually, you know, I'm going to stick to that because I think we've covered most of this in depth. Is we're clearing to the surface that's out there right now, and that's what we're asking the commission to do. Any plans in the future? Those are in the future, and if any of them require to come back before the commission, we will do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, with that, we will begin the process of allowing commissioners, I'm going to let Bob go first, to state, again, we're not making any final decisions today, but I think that at this point, it's incumbent upon us to let the applicant and all the commentators and the community know where we individually stand on this application and what we see, what we are prepared at this point to vote to approve or deny, and what, if anything, could change that position in the next short period, because we are quickly approaching a deadline of having to make a final decision. So, Bob, I will let you go first since you've raised your hand.
Well, thank you, Jan, but that's not exactly why I raised my hand. I had
Well, do both.
One more follow-up question on my favorite topic, and this is about the one-way approach. If someone is coming in with GPS guidance, they still must have a visual approach. If they were to use the so-called 200-foot width run approach and not the 400 wide runway approach, would that be an impediment or would that be a problem for them? Would that be a non-starter in some way?
Yeah, I mean, you're getting into whether or not a visual approach is safer than a GPS approach, and I just don't know what the value of going down that road is. The existing surface, as Mark stated, is 400 feet in width. That's what we're before the Conservation Commission to clear to. I just don't know, Madam Chair, getting into a debate over what's safer visual, GPS, LPV. I just don't know what purpose that serves this afternoon.
Was that where you were going with this, Bob, or were you?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I'm asking whether or not, if, just for example, the Conservation Commission approved clearing to the 200-foot width, what would be the impact on the airport?
They would be non-compliant with their grant assurances because they would not have clear approaches to their existing approach surface.
The grant assurances for future funding?
Grant assurances for future funding, for past funding. I know that that's been brought up as to whether or not the FAA could or would claw back funding. We've had conversations with FAA New England region that confirms that, in fact, they could claw back funding. So, yeah, it would impact the airport in a whole host of ways.
Go ahead, Commissioner Galen, you have something to add?
It would be non-compliance with the situation right now. We are not in compliance as we sit here and speak today. We were told that by the FAA in 2017.
No.
All right, that's it. Thank you. Janet, actually, I'm not necessarily wanting to go first, so if anybody else wants to, I'll be happy to.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said I'm not necessarily seeking to go first.
Oh, okay.
If
Well,
anyone
okay.
wants to, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so let me start. I'm going to just pick down here, this side, and pick on Cheryl to go first.
I'm going to be quick.
There you go. That's how we like it to.
Right. I do have something written down because I know I totally lose my train of thought. And actually, I've already X'd out part of my thing I was going to say. This has been a very complicated NOI. I don't think anybody can dispute that. There's been so much information and competing interpretations of what's required. Overall, this is a huge project, and we are only able to regulate a very small portion of it. It might be an important portion, but it's really very small. There's a much bigger discussion that needs to be taking place in town about that we're not responsible for. I cannot focus on the larger project, which honestly, I wish wasn't happening if the amount of trees that are rumored to be removed are actually going to be removed. That removal will change the bike trail, the sound buffer around the airport, and Chatham. But I am not being asked to regulate that. No one is. So I have to focus on the NOI before the commission. Only what's before the commission, and that's wetlands protection issues. I will say that I'm glad we had this discussion today because I am persuaded by Adrian's argument that the single count of trees and the acreage count of trees, this is a different kind of project because you are destroying a forest. And so we need to recreate a forest someplace else. So I understand that maybe the acreage way to count or pay is okay. It doesn't set a precedence for the homeowner or somebody else who, sorry, pollen. So it doesn't set a precedence for, I don't think it sets a precedence for all other applications. So I am persuaded about that. I do want further consultation on the price of how we're going to figure out how much this stuff costs, because I understand that we're not going to be trying to plant a huge oak tree on Main Street. This is a different kind of project. So I changed that, took out a whole paragraph of what I was saying. But the one thing that I am concerned about is the vernal pool. And I want as little canopy remover as possible, preferring actually that the vernal pool is left untouched. So there you go. That's me.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. Mary, you've turned on your camera, so that's a signal to me that you're preparing to speak.
No, well, it wasn't, but
The floor is
I will go
yours.
ahead. Anyways, no, I will say, Cheryl said it best when this was a very complicated project. And I think we have to remember that there's trade-offs with everything. You have the FAA has their regulations. They have their regulations for safety. We hear all the time, people putting in pools, for their, not only for their enjoyment, but they need more area closer to the wetlands because of safety, to keep children out, animals out. There is always going to be a balance between things that are done from different commissions. Our commission is focused on the Wetlands Protection Act. And we are also very much interested in the overall environment. The amount of carbon capture that's lost by this project is unbelievable. But that's not what the Wetlands Protection Act allows us to regulate. So we can only regulate the very small piece near the vernal pool and the wetlands. And my only concern with this is that, we talked about, this is not an economic decision. However, the FAA could possibly claw back money. They wouldn't be able to fund other things. There is money involved, and the money being offered to try to make up for the lost forest is, in my mind, totally insufficient. It doesn't meet any of the needs of the Wetlands Protection Act. So that's all I have to say. But the good news is, from your perspective, I can't vote on this since I missed a couple meetings. So.
Yeah, because this hearing has gone on for as many months as it has, and this is, by my count, our 10th hearing. Inevitably, people will miss them because life interferes. And there is a Mass General Law that basically says that any member of a committee or a commission may miss no more than a single session of a hearing and still retain qualification to vote. And in this case, we have 2 members who missed more than one. So that's unfortunate, but I guess that's just going to be reality. So that leaves 5. So anyway, let me turn to one of the 5, Elise, and ask you to tell us where you stand on this.
Relieved that I learned I get to vote today. I wrote up some notes too, so I apologize for reading, and I promise I won't riff off the script because then I'd say way too much. This, and repeated, but it can't be repeated enough, this has been a very challenging process for us as a commission, for the town, for the Airport Commission, and for GZI. And before I get into the detail, I want to commend you guys at GZI, Adrian, Matt, and Mark. Your diligence and patience with this process has been amazing from my perspective. So thank you for what you're contributing to the town. I realize this project is rarely straightforward, this type of project, but what I've learned about Chatham in my work on the Conservation Commission, our constituency is very, very protective of our unique environment as it is perceived by us in Chatham, and we have an obligation as a commission to the town to protect that environment. I think that's our basic charge. That being said, here are some of the bases for my thoughts. Safety at the airport is priority number 1. Around that, I have a question on the topic that I didn't ask earlier because it's an put it out in the air kind of a question. We had a 2015 Land Use Inspection Correction Activate Action Plan that was put into place, but never, from my viewpoint, acted upon. And we are actually catching up for lost time. We've put the lack of action on that plan, in my opinion, has really created an unbalanced position. I realize also that our bylaws do not currently accommodate topping trees, and I would request that trimming trees be removed from the lexicon of anybody that refers to the airport project. But I wonder what would have happened if in the last 9 years we had paid attention to the growth of the trees as we went along, so we wouldn't have this massive project. The second, our focus has to be on our jurisdiction only, and I know that frustrates people who want us to go beyond that, but it has to be. Our protecting the environment is equally important as the safety issue. We're on Cape Cod, and especially in Chatham, we're really, really vulnerable to climate change. Although we feel we can, really make nature adjust to our advantage, I couldn't think of anything else but that old TV commercial, "It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. She always gets back at us." So I would argue to be very, very, very thorough and cautious with this. And the last point, the Cape Cod Commission hasn't weighed in yet, and I really await that before our final decision. That's really critical to see what they say. I've grouped the variances into 3 parts because we don't need to talk about all 9. Non-tree removal, non-vernal pool tree removal. I hope for a deliberate process, which you guys have really committed to, which involves our conservation agent, members of the commission hopefully can participate as you're going through this, and an arborist. The tree population is too dense to give us adequate removal predictions, so I look at that as a living thing. An accurate count of trees is not available now, and this, again, should be updated as we go forward. I have a visceral reaction to the machinery that is used for tree removal. So I feel that trees should be removed with the least destructive approach as possible to the rest of the environment. As to the vernal pool, I am with Cheryl on the vernal pool. I don't want to see one thing removed. I know we thought it was less dense than we expected, but I really feel that is a really vulnerable area. Question that I had too when I was reviewing that guidance document, Adrian, that you provided. In my review, it was, and again, it's 2019 data that's in that, but there was 2 airports that had vernal pools listed in that document that had work done. One was New Bedford, but that's a commercial classification. Fitchburg was the one that seemed most similar to Chatham. It's general aviation. It's a little bigger, 335 acres. They have a vernal pool. I tried to find online what the status of that pool is. Since their work was done, I couldn't find anything. So I don't know if you were involved in that, but there we go. As for mitigation, love the invasive growth approach management you're going to take. I still would prefer a combination of planting and seeding rather than just seeding. I think we need to work on the financial contribution, and I appreciate the addition of the environmental monitor staff that's going to be added to the process. That's my spiel.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's go down the other end. Bob, you're up.
I have a statement to read. In my view, this decision is based on public safety, public health, and the environment. Each of these concerns are important to our residents, airplane pilots and staff, and the animals and plants that live at the airport property. The natural environment is linked to each of us. A healthy living environment from a water, plant, and an animal perspective affects the health and well-being of all people. We need to strike a balance so our community can coexist with our natural ecosystem. The proposal from the airport consultant is to cut trees which are considered a hazard to aircraft traffic. According to the tree survey, many trees within the property's vernal pool plus other trees close to the runway, approach zones, should be cut to enhance the safety of airport operations. There needs to be a balance to protect both the natural health of the freshwater the ecosystem and the public safety of the pilots, its passengers, and the residents surrounding the airport. My thinking is to save the trees in the very sensitive vernal pool area. The vernal pool supports several vulnerable plants and animals which could be negatively impacted if trees are cut in this sub-ecosystem. In my view, the cutting of trees in this area is too risky and would harm its freshwater and living creatures, causing a domino effect in the greater ecosystem. To improve public safety, the trees on the outskirts could be selectively cut without creating as much damage to the wetlands. Any tree cut should be left to decompose on the forest floor, thus providing some benefit to its plant and animal inhabitants, or could be cut several feet above the ground to continue to benefit birds and animals. Any trees that are ultimately cut should be compensated for by purchasing and planting replacement and new trees on town property. In summary, to protect both the public health and the well-being of the natural environment, we should compromise, thereby implementing a solution that helps to protect both interests.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Eric?
First of all, I apologize. Sometimes I shoot from the hip. I'm not any way as educated as my fellow commissioners. I've done all right. I've been a landscaper, had a landscape company for over 40 years. I've heard a few comments that stuck with me on this project. Chatham's the only airport left with visual approach. Thank goodness. It's nice to be the only left of something. Our vernal pools are protected for a reason. I mean, I feel bad for the commission, the airport commission, because, this is kind of a bummer because we're in your way. You want something and we're in your way. The last town meeting was a good example of how people feel in this town, how this is going. I'm just telling you simple things that I see. I grew up in Chatham, and there was another comment. Yes, I remember the trees surrounding the airport were once smaller. I've been here for 55 years. But I also remember when there was one little water tower, and we hesitated hooking up to the water tower because the well water was just fine. Gone, okay? I grew up in Lover's Lake, which is pretty close to the airport. I remember fishing in Lover's Lake. We used to catch largemouth bass, pickerel, pike. We used to dive for painted turtles, try to avoid the huge snapping turtles, even though they did swim away. I complained about the peepers at night, the bullfrogs. We could collect freshwater mussels in Lover's Lake, and neighbors trapped eels for bait. Gone. There might be a few snappers, a few bullfrogs here and there. Everybody's got a story to tell and something to propose. I can only go by what I've seen here for the many years that I've lived here. And I can see a decline, how things are going and how our environment is holding on by a thread, in my opinion. I'm not an expert. I understand the safety matters. The safety is also important. I'm a little more understanding on the north side. I don't know what you call it. I use a map. The north side of the runway on the 1950s version. To make it safer on that end, and then, but as far as the vernal end, the vernal pool goes, I mean, you use the north end on a rough day, and use the vernal pool on a nice clear day, and go around it. That's my opinion on the matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric. Bob doesn't have his hand up, Karen, so I'm going to look at you.
Oh, lucky me. Well, I don't have a whole lot to add to what's been said. It does concern me that this is a very small part of a larger project, but it is the only part that is regulated. As everyone knows, I've been very concerned about the vernal pool, and so as a result, requested a consultant and all of that in order to be sure that we did what's best for that end of the airport. Having said that, I think every aspect that we have under our purview is important. but it seems easier to regulate and, keep an eye on which trees are being removed when it's around the pond, a pond, or the bog. While I don't want to see any trees removed, it seems a bit easier, and so that's where we concentrated with giving us estimates on tree removal initially. As far as the vernal pool, I have two concerns. One is, we're not real sure how far into the vernal pool truly is going to be affected. Having said that, there are some things that they have proposed, and either they've proposed them or our consultant proposed them, which is doing selective pruning, or cutting, not pruning, around the vernal pool, and doing it slowly to evaluate the effects on the vernal pool. Leaving some of the trees that were cut down so that the species can benefit from it. Using, not machinery, but cutting, quote unquote, by hand, not using major machinery, and controlling when any cutting does take place is incredibly important to me, because we are a certified vernal pool, and there aren't a lot of those. Having said all of that, as everybody said, I would really rather not see anything taken down around the vernal pool. But there is a safety concern. And actually, I do have a son-in-law who has flown into here, so I don't want anything to happen to him. But he's flown in there safely many times, and it bothers me that it's been said today, we've been in non-compliance since 2017. So we now are being asked in our area to become compliant for something that hasn't been dealt with in 7 years. I do wonder if we had started this 7 years ago, would we be in the same situation? So that does concern me. And I think that's about it. I think, I understand the need for this. There's so much that bothers me, but I'm hoping that if we do go to an order, we can control what happens through our processes that we will stipulate in the order, if it gets to that point.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Bob?
Yes, hi. I also had a script.
You need you to speak up just a little bit to your...
All right. I had a script constructed as well, but I think I'm just going to skip it since a lot of it was already spoken by others. As you could tell by my questions today, my focus was in trying to become as convinced as possible, as much as I could, that there were no alternatives to the amount of vegetation that the airport would like to, is asking to cut. That's, to me, a prior question from the question of how we mitigate what is cut. And I came in not necessarily convinced that there weren't alternatives. And I think the airport's answers to my questions have helped me become more comfortable with the idea that in reality there are no practical alternatives to it. So progress is made here, at least for me. I still would like to, as I mentioned before, have some sort of statement, for the record at least, that if we don't already have it, that displacement was explicitly ruled out as an option for the airport. Other than that, I think I've finally grasped the runway approach zones and the intricacies thereof, and the fact that there's really no practical way to avoid cutting the amount of vegetation that's being sought. It's as everyone has said, this has been a difficult decision, difficult project. no matter how we vote on this, we're going to make many people unhappy, unfortunately. So that's where I am right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. All right, then just me. And I think what I'm going to say reflects a lot of what everybody else has been saying. This has been, there's so much noise and confusion around this. I think some of that is due to the inherent complexity of the project, some of the technical complexity of airport design and operation, all of which is new for us. And so when I start wanting to seek clarity amidst the confusion, I fall back on the basic foundations of the Wetlands Protection Act, and that is avoid, minimize, mitigate. Always, always, always go through that analysis. That analysis, carefully done, will generally lead you to the right outcome. So when I look at avoidance, gets right to the heart of the purpose of the project. Why is this project being done? And I think I have read enough, particularly in the generic environmental assessment, in the specific environmental assessment, and the finding of no significant impact, and all of the different documents that the FAA and indeed DEP in their guidance documents have been a party to, indicates there's no doubt from my perspective that this project is necessary to some extent for safety reasons, regardless of whether that's a specific mandate on the part of the FAA or where that arises from. It arose for me standing in the back parking lot of the job lot as the plane was landing and seeing that it was just skirting the very tops of the trees. And it became obvious at that point. And so the safety aspect means that obstructions in the approach area exist and need to be removed. To me, that's pretty axiomatic here. But that gets us right to the minimize portion, because we, as a commission, push back on applications based on what we perceive as unnecessary impacts. And we push back on applicants to shrink the area of the impact, make it smaller, reduce what you're doing. We do this all the time. With 85% of the applications, we push back to minimize the impact. So here, the impact is in this approach area. And what exactly the approach area is has been a devil of a question to get a clear answer to. Witness the struggle we're going through today, trying to get to a clear understanding of that. You know, we looked at all the site plans. I can't get past how the airport layout plan and the master plan update both use this language existing and proposed, even granting that they were prepared in 2018, 2019, 2020, some period around there. I don't understand why they would use the language proposed unless there was something driving a change that was being requested. So that gets me to Bob's actual question, which was, you know, what happens if we didn't approve the entire portion of the project that is being requested? So that arrives at, there's a second bylaw in Chatham that applies to this. And, you know, and there's a rule out there that says when you have two laws that apply to a single situation, you need to try to reconcile them and not favor one over the other. We have what's called an airport protection approach bylaw, and it was adopted in 1997, not 2017. This has been in effect since 1997. And it basically says that there may be no obstructions, natural, vegetative, or man-made, within the airport approach zone. And any obstruction that is there or grows into that zone must be removed. That's clearly for the safety purposes. That's what the Chatham bylaw requires. So when you look at that and you say, okay, I get that, what exactly is the airport approach zone, since that's the question we continue to wrestle with. And the Chatham bylaw, and I've got the page up here, defines the airport approach zone as the airspace in the areas defined and shown on the map of approach zones Chatham Airport dated February 1958, on file in the town clerk's office and made a part of this chapter. That language is important. Made a part of this chapter means that map is incorporated into the bylaw. So we have this bylaw that says the approach zone is, and under, if you look at the 1958 map, it's roughly the visual existing map that we looked at earlier, the 200-foot wide approach area. Town meeting, as we all know, there was an article presented to change that map reference from the 1958 to a newer March 2024 map that was pretty resoundingly defeated. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that, but I'm left thinking we have two bylaws that apply, and that unless and until there's a change in this one, the only way to reconcile these two bylaws is to accept the public safety issue and approve a plan to remove the vegetation in the obstruction in the approach zone, as we understand that to be. Now, we've also talked about this is not going to be a one and done kind of situation. So as we go forward, assuming, and what I'm hearing is that most commission members are reluctantly or not have indicated a willingness to approve an order under certain conditions. And so we will be working to see if we can understand what those conditions are. But from my perspective, one of them would be that at least for the time being, going out with an order that would be limited to what the town law says the airport approach zone is. Now, that may put you in violation of your grant assurances. You know, you've been in violation of this bylaw since 1997. So it's, you know, I don't understand why there's sudden urgency about this right now, but I'm not inclined to overreach what is an applicable law right here in this town and approve something that goes beyond this. So all of this confusion about, you know, the visual and the instrument and the precision and the guided and the GPS and all of that are noise around the edges, when what I'm looking at is how the town bylaw defines the approach zone. So my view is I'd be willing to support an order of conditions that's limited in that way, that has a lot of the things that we've talked about here. And we did see how if you limit that extent, the scope of the approach zone, you reduce the impact on the vernal pool by about 70%. It looks like that's a rough guess. But we can also build in a lot of the other suggestions that we've heard here today about building in processes for the monitoring of the cutting, for submissions of materials that have to be reviewed and approved by the agent, which mostly would mean us, because if I were Paul, I wouldn't want to approve anything on my own. I'd say here, and yes, we will have a hearing and we will have to approve it. But I think that while a little bit cumbersome, that's a way that we can resolve this in the most careful way possible. Even though we would love to say, we are done with this, that's just not going to happen. So I would support taking a crack at writing an order of conditions to see if we can capture all of the concerns. And if and when the applicant believes that you can come back to request a plan change, because one other thing I will tell you, that we always get a certified survey of the activity area. We've had plans, we've got maps, we've got things superimposed on aerial photographs. I haven't seen anything that is actually a meets and bounds survey of the impact area. That is something that I think would be in an order of conditions, that has to be presented, reviewed, and approved. And if the airport believes it needs to address, for safety reasons, areas beyond that, you can come back for a plan change or a field change or an amendment to the order, or a number of different ways that we can continue to evolve the regulation of this project as we move forward. But I think that's the key phrase for me, that we stay involved, we regulate the evolution of this project to try to avoid unnecessary impacts, minimize the ones that we can avoid, and mitigate for the impacts that we have found unavoidable. So that's where I come out.
Well done.
No, I don't know. With that, I would, unless there's anything else to say. Bob, you have your hand up. Okay.
No, actually, it's me,
Yeah, Jen,
Madam
I
Chair.
just wanted to,
Oh,
go ahead.
Paul, and, okay.
I'll wait for Commissioner Rawls.
Okay, go ahead,
yeah,
Bob.
it'll be short. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I am comfortable with your approach on this, Jen. I actually came in today thinking that I would arrive at generally the same conclusion, but for different reasons, mostly having to do with analysis of alternatives. But you have approached it from a regulatory perspective, a bylaw perspective, which you've arrived at more or less the same place that I was not trying to get to, but thinking that I would wind up at. So I'm in agreement with your overall conclusion here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Paul. I see you had three.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. A comment was made earlier by one of the commissioners about wanting to see the Cape Cod Commission pass on this before you vote. That's not going to happen. They're actually waiting, and I received a request from Jordan at Cape Cod Commission for your order of conditions relating to the vernal pool, so they can incorporate that into their decision-making process. So they're going to be some months behind. I don't know how long it takes for that to take place, but I wouldn't expect you to have anything from the Cape Cod Commission by the time you're ready to vote.
Right. I assumed that. I know that they have a subcommittee hearing scheduled for June 25th, the day before where we're continuing this hearing for. So we'll all be probably, curious about how that goes, but it's an independent process going on its own timeline. And I think that's probably appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Matt, you had your hand up.
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Would written correspondence from FAA New England region defining the airport's approach surface change your opinion on what you would issue an order of conditions on, as far as the surface that we clear to?
Well, I don't know.
I mean, if I get FAA New England region to call out and define in the advisory circular what the appropriate existing surface is at the airport, does that change your opinion on the order of condition, limiting it to?
You're using language that I'm not understanding the implications of. If they call out, and does it mean that is a mandatory area for obstruction
Correct.
removal? What does that mean? As long as it's
Yes.
clear, but if it's more, I mean, I don't want to say doublespeak, but because that has negative that government speak. I don't. But if it's we would entertain it. We would take a look at it and see. I can't make any promises for anybody else.
But it still won't change our bylaw, right?
Yeah, no, we still have this conflict with the bylaw. Right. All right, okay. Bob, is that a new hand? No, it's not a new hand. So we will over the next couple of weeks, we, on this side, will start putting together, see if we can capture all of this in a draft order. That'll take all of the 2 weeks, I'm sure. But we will make a draft available to you in advance of the next hearing date, so you have a chance to review it. And we hope that we will be able to vote on that on the 26th, because after that, we start to lose members as the fiscal year changes. So with that, I will take a motion to continue.
Well, does Paul have to say nothing unforeseen?
No, I'm continuing this matter.
Oh, yeah.
Not adjourning.
Oh, true. That's
well,
right. I move that we continue to, I'm jumping ahead.
Hello.
I move that we continue 240 and 438 George Ryder Road and 1652 Main Street to the meeting on June 26th.
Gordon, second.
Roll call vote. Elise.
Aye.
Cheryl.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Mary.
Aye.
Bob.
Aye.
And I vote aye. So we will gather one more time on June 26th.
Bye, Bob.
And see where that is. So, Bob, thank you so much for interrupting your vacation, and go get on your kayak and go somewhere. Go do something else. Thank
Will
you.
do.
Thank you for
Thank you. Bye-bye.
participating. That was important.
Find another conservation commission you can go on.
Wonder what it's like in Alaska. All right, Adrian, Mark, Matt, thank you, guys. Thank you, and thank you to the folks in the room who came. All of everyone's participation is a lot to handle, but it's all appreciated, because in the end of the day, it makes for better decision-making. So, all right, thank you all. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Go ahead, Paul.
Paul, or we have anything?
No, I just gotta, you don't intend to close today, right?
No, I decided against
Okay.
that.
All right, good, good.
You don't what?
All right,
Not
thank you.
closing.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's, I want to see what, if anything, that they submit, and leave that open. Nothing, no unforeseen items?
No unforeseen items.
Thank the Lord for that.
Still some sun shining, so go enjoy.
All right.
Okay, I move that we adjourn.
Gordon,
Okay,
second.
bye.
All right, bye, Paul. Elise?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Bob? He's already gone. He's already having back on vacation. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you. Appreciate it.